Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook Library, a sanctuary of stories where fan fictions come alive, where ancient legends echo from the East and Western worlds awaken with wonder. Settle in. Your journey begins now.
The Shadow Monarch in the Marvel World Chapter 51 Inches. Should I call someone to upgrade the wiring and electrical systems? Ember asked calmly. Ashbourne paused, realizing that, among many other things, he did need a TV. He let out a small sigh before shaking his head. It can wait, at least until I have someone smart become my shadow. He trailed off, already reaching out through his shadows, searching for any scientists or tech-savvy minds who could handle the upgrades. When Ashbourne used shadow extraction on every lifeless body in Gotham, he meant everyone, or at least, anyone whose bones could still be found. Due to the sheer range he had reached, the bodies had to have died within the past 5 years. Still, that was more than enough. As of now, Ashbourne had tens of thousands of shadows under his command, because this was Gotham, after all. Among them were scientists, engineers, and plenty of brilliant minds, all possessing the skills needed to improve his home. And, of course, they were far smarter than they had been in life. Not to mention stronger. The shadows got to work immediately. Using the vast resources stored within Ashbourne's shadow, they began upgrading the mansion. Fortunately, Ashbourne had plenty. His shadows had been stockpiling materials just in case. Among those resources were items belonging to Reed Richards, along with a collection of powerful magical artifacts once held by Dr. Strange, though Ashbourne had no idea. He had never bothered to check what his shadows had actually stored away for him. Regardless, time passed quickly. The shadows moved with relentless efficiency, and since Ashbourne allowed them access to his abilities, their work progressed at an unbelievable pace. By the time they were done, the mansion was no longer just a luxurious estate. It had been transformed into something so technologically advanced, it would put Wakanda to shame. "Why do you keep looking at the clock?" Ember asked, noticing how Ashbourne kept glancing at it every few minutes. "Because noon is when I officially become the new leader of the Justice League," Ashbourne said lightly. Ember nodded lazily, twirling the card he had given her between her fingers. After a moment, she spoke. "I've been meaning to tell you something." Her tone was casual, but there was something in the way she said it that made Ashbourne pause, turning to her in confusion. "You're not as ugly as you think you are," Ember said calmly. "Your self-esteem is way too low, it's blinding you to reality." Ashbourne raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, right," he scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Then explain why there were no zombie baddies chasing after me." But as the words left his mouth, something clicked. His mind replayed past interactions, piecing things together. The way Wonder Woman had reacted, considering her character, her interest in him only made sense if he was actually good-looking. Otherwise, it would be completely out of character for her. What? Ember's head snapped to the side, eyes wide with shock. Had she just heard him correctly? "I said," Ashbourne repeated, unfazed, "if I were actually handsome, then why were zombies more interested in eating me than befriending me?" Ember just stared at him. "Oh, that reminds me," Ashbourne added casually as if he hadn't just said something ridiculous. "I need to head back to Asgard and free those death deities I imprisoned." "Zombies were charmed by you," Ember said matter-of-factly. "That's why they came after you, even though you didn't give off any scent. Your charm drew them in, making you more valuable than any living flesh out there." Ashbourne stared at her, speechless. But it kind of made sense. People expressed love in weird ways. Look at Ant-Man, for example. He beat his wife as a sign of love. His mind suddenly shifted gears. "So, theoretically, I could form a harem." The idea popped into his head, but after a few moments of deeper thought, all the energy drained from him. Just imagining how exhausting that would be made him want to drop it entirely. "What?" Ember's sharp glare cut through his thoughts like a blade. Ashbourne awkwardly scratched the back of his head, suddenly realizing he had no good way to explain what he had just said. "A harem sounds nice and all," Ember said, turning away, "but you'd be wise to know your place. As you stand now, you're already above gods like Odin. Your mindset still needs to catch up to your power." Ashbourne watched her go before shrugging. "I don't actually need a harem," he admitted. "It's just every guy's dream, you know. But honestly, I think I speak for most guys when I say, I'd give it all up for Nami. Ember halted mid-step, throwing him a confused glance, and a hint of something else. What's Nami? She asked, her eyes narrowing. Is that the name of a person? Ashbourne shook his head with a straight face. It means dream wife, Ashbourne said, gazing off into the sky with a wistful look. I just hope to find her one day. Ember's eye twitched. She was standing right there. But you wouldn't understand, Ashbourne added lazily, completely oblivious to her reaction. With your emotions suppressed and all, I bet the concept of love is just a distant memory for you, but hey, it's all right. Ember's expression darkened, a dangerous glint in her eyes, like she was seriously considering drowning someone. Anyway, Ashbourne continued, shifting gears. I think you should seal off all emotions and focus on mastering one from the emotional spectrum at a time. Once you can wield it as a weapon with 100% control, move on to the next. What do you think? He turned to look at Ember, who had adopted an eerily calm expression. I'll start with hope, she began, but then frowned. No, hope wouldn't work. She hoped Ashbourne would stop being a dumbass. Fear. She feared this was all their relationship was ever going to be. Every emotion she considered just circled back to him. She knew Ashbourne didn't mean for things to be this way. She saw it. The way he looked at her sometimes, only to quickly pull away out of respect. She knew he had some kind of feelings for her. Yes, she could just come out and tell him she loved him, but she was scared. She had seen what happened between Jean Grey and Scott Summers. The thought of Ashbourne ever daring to cheat on her, it hurt her soul, and the worst part. She couldn't see herself hating him for it, but she respected herself too much to put herself in that position, to let herself degrade to that. She respected herself too much. Chapter 52. Deep within the Batcave, Batman sat back in his chair, staring at the blank screen in front of him. Many people thought they understood Batman. But in truth, most only knew fragments, versions of him pieced together from comics, cartoons, Lego figures, and movies. The multiverse had countless Batmen, each shaped by different circumstances, but at their core, they were all the same. It all traced back to a single defining moment. The death of his parents. There was something else people often overlooked about Batman: he was human. And like any human, he carried trauma. The weight of his parents' deaths had never truly left him, because deep down, no matter how much time had passed, he still blamed himself, fighting crime, locking criminals behind bars. Most people didn't realize it, but that was his way of channeling his grief. Batman was insane. And yet, people tended to overlook that. He wasn't Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne was a mask, a carefully crafted illusion. In truth, Bruce Wayne might as well have died the same night his parents did, leaving behind nothing but a broken, traumatized child filled with rage and grief. Batman understood why Ashbourne wanted to push him toward therapy. But Batman wasn't someone who could ever have a normal mental state. Not like everyone else. The Joker was right. They were alike. No sane man could ever hope to be Batman. Because to be Batman meant you weren't right in the head. The only difference between him and the Joker was the side they fought for. Batman stood with the good guys, while the Joker spent every waking moment trying to push him over the edge. Batman couldn't be allowed to kill. Because if he did, who could stop him? He took a deep breath before rising from his chair. The first step was putting Ashbourne's plan into motion. If he faked his death before the Joker, would the Joker truly disappear? It was something Batman had to do. Because despite everything, he didn't just want to stop the Joker. He wanted to save him. It was weird, wasn't it? Batman wanted to save someone like the Joker. And that was something Ashbourne would never understand about these so-called heroes. He even recalled a scene he had watched in his past life, Batman risking his own life to save the Joker. Ashbourne got the argument behind refusing to kill. He understood the principle of it. But why go that far? Why would Batman do something so foolish? Ashbourne wanted to change that mindset. Sure, they could put their lives on the line for innocent people. That made sense. But why the Joker? Why couldn't they be more like the movie version of Batman? Just jump off the train and let the villain die. Oh, Ashbourne knew Batman would try to save the Joker. That was why he had given Batman the perfect way to do it, one that ensured the Joker would never return. And now, With Batman in possession of Iron Man-level armor, everything was in place. Batman wouldn't have to be Batman anymore. Instead, he would become the symbol others looked up to, someone stepping in to carry on Batman's legacy, rather than being trapped in it. Ashbourne's vision for Batman was simple. A Batman who wasn't the other side of the Joker. A Batman who wasn't just a hero fueled by trauma, but a Batman more like the one from The Brave and the Bold. Ashbourne didn't want the unrealistic Batman, the one who could somehow defeat Superman. That was stupid. Even with prep time, even if you ignored everything else, Superman was just too fast. If he was actually trying, Batman would never truly stand a chance. Meanwhile, the brave and the bold version of Batman felt far more realistic to Ashbourne. That Batman wasn't some brooding force of endless darkness, he was still human. A man who fought crime but didn't lose himself to it. And right now, the Justice League didn't need more darkness. They had Ashbourne for that. "I'm heading to the store to buy a phone. You wanna come?" Ashbourne called out to Ember, who was in her room. There was a brief pause before Ember finally emerged, nodding. "Might as well. I wanna see if there's anything actually worth buying." As they walked, Ember lazily twirled the card between her fingers. "So, how likely do you think Batman is to go through with your plan to fake his death?" 100%, Ashbourne said without hesitation. "Wonder Woman has no problem killing. So even if I don't act, she, or someone else I've given the green light to will." He glanced at Ember. Batman knows how many people want the clown dead. He's just the only one willing to put his life on the line to save him. "Hell, I don't even think Superman would go that far." Ashbourne smirked. "Batman will do exactly as I said. He'll fake his death, and if the Joker doesn't disappear, that'll be his way of trying to undermine me, to show everyone that I don't know what I'm talking about. But once my plan is proven to work," Ashbourne continued, "Batman will have no choice but to fall in line. Bit by bit, I'll make him face his trauma and conquer it, and in the end, I'll create the perfect Batman." Ember hummed, spinning the card between her fingers. "I'm a little disappointed," she mused. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow. "Oh, why not just separate Batman and Bruce Wayne?" she asked lazily. "Make Batman his own entity and have him become your shadow. For a normal human, Batman is far more impressive than that one guy with a shield back home." Ashbourne paused. He hadn't considered that. "It'd be interesting to see a fight between Iron Man and Batman," Ember mused. "From what I've seen of Batman's past, he'd hack into the suit or implant a virus. He'd win through preparation rather than direct combat. He's already secretly planted a virus in Cyborg. He's dangerous to be around." Ashbourne raised an eyebrow, considering that. "That fight would be one hell of a fight to watch. There are infinite evil Batmen out there," he muttered, his tone shifting. "Which reminds me of the whole flaw in the Batman Who Laughs storyline." Ember raised an eyebrow as Ashbourne sighed in irritation. "If there's a Bruce Wayne out there recreating the experiment that gave Drive Manhattan his powers, then wouldn't that mean there are infinite versions of people across the multiverse doing the exact same thing?" The thought annoyed him. The logic of it all was just messy. If that was so, then shouldn't there be countless versions of the Batman Who Laughs? Superman Who Laughs, Wonder Woman Who Laughs, with infinite possibilities. That would mean everything that could happen is happening, an infinite number of times, across an infinite number of realities. Ashbourne hated that logic. He preferred it when Dr. Manhattan existed outside the multiverse, when he came from somewhere else, making him a singular being. There was supposed to be only one Drive Manhattan. There should always be just one. But now, the possibility of there being infinite, fuck. Ashbourne's face paled as the horrifying thought of an infinite number of Dr. Manhattans running loose across the multiverse sank in. But he quickly shook his head. No, that was too ridiculous. Surely something that wild wouldn't actually happen, right? Wait. Ashbourne turned to Ember, his mind shifting gears. If I can gain new power, wouldn't that also mean I could recover my old strength faster? Ember barely spared him a glance. That storm you fought didn't erase your recovery. It just negated it temporarily with its attacks, she said with a shrug. It couldn't completely stop you from regaining your strength. She tilted her head, considering it. I'd say you've got about 1 billion years before you return to peak power. But the stronger you get in the meantime, the faster it'll happen. I'd recommend drawing power from this omniverse's source, Ember said lazily. That's what I've been doing. I didn't just recover my strength, I surpassed it. Ashbourne blinked at her. She was telling him this now. Meanwhile, across the multiverse, in one universe, a man who looked exactly like Clark Kent stood atop a slab of kryptonite, preparing to initiate a radioactive particle test. In another, Deathstroke stood in a similar setup, moments away from conducting the exact same experiment. In yet another, Lex Luthor was mere seconds from replicating the experiment that had once transformed Drive. Manhattan. And the list went on. Infinite variations of different people, all unknowingly reaching toward the same impossible power. Elsewhere, a black lantern ring gleamed ominously on the decayed hand of a figure barely clinging to existence. His flesh had rotted away, revealing the remnants of what was once a face. In his grip, a death scythe pulsed with an unnatural energy. But his focus was on the fragment floating before him, an ever-changing weapon, shifting between forms, radiating an aura of pure darkness. Slowly, he reached out. The moment his fingers grasped the broken weapon, an unearthly cry tore from his throat as raw power surged through him. Darkness swarmed around him, crawling over his body like living shadows, forming a thick, unbreakable shell. A cocoon. A pure black egg pulsed where he once stood, radiating with terrifying energy. Inside, he slept, waiting. Waiting to hatch. Far stronger than ever before. Chapter 53 Inches. We have the money. Go ahead. Walking through the streets, Ashbourne and Ember moved at a leisurely pace, their eyes scanning the many items on display. Well, Ember was the one actually paying attention. As a phoenix, she had never cared for material things. But now she was human, and suddenly, she understood why her former hosts had enjoyed shopping. The thought of stepping inside, trying on different outfits, experimenting with lipsticks and accessories, it all drew her in. Even though she didn't need to buy any of it, she could easily create these things with a thought, and yet, the experience itself was strangely appealing. So, your money is my money? Ember asked, raising an eyebrow. Ashbourne, still lazily scanning the area for an Apple store, nodded without much thought. Yeah, he was about to say something else but paused when he saw Ember walk into a store, her face lit up with an uncharacteristically bright smile. Is shopping really that fun? Ashbourne thought, watching her with a weird expression. But after a second, he just shrugged and kept walking. Besides, there was no issue. Even though they only had one card, Ashbourne had warped reality to make a perfect copy of it. So, Ember could enjoy herself as much as she wanted. No way. Ashbourne was lost. Wandering around like a headless chicken, he tried to make sense of his surroundings when a sudden cry caught his attention. He turned, only to see a stunning black-haired woman striding toward him, her expression filled with shock and recognition. Oh my God, it really is you, she exclaimed, her smile bright with amazement. It's been so long since we last met. What are you doing all the way out here? What? Ashbourne blinked in confusion. Sorry, but I think you've got the wrong person. How could anyone in this omniverse know him? He had just arrived in DC, was this some kind of time travel nonsense? The thought annoyed him. Time travel was always way too complicated to understand or explain, but the woman just smirked. Yeah, right, like I'd ever forget you. Then her expression softened. Wait, don't tell me you forgot me. She placed a hand on her hip. I'm Tyler. We went to high school together. Ashbourne's eyes widened in pure shock. He had gone to high school with a girl named Tyler, in his past life. No way, he breathed. How are you here? It's a long story, Tyler said with a smile, clearly happy that Ashbourne hadn't forgotten her. Mainly work, if I'm being honest. What about you? Ashbourne hesitated for a moment before offering an awkward smile. Yeah, I'd have to say the same. If she wasn't going to tell him why she was in this omniverse, then he wasn't about to spill his reason either. We have to catch up, Tyler said excitedly, pulling out her phone. What's your number? We should meet up and go over everything we've missed these past few years. Ashbourne awkwardly rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, about that, he sighed. I don't have a phone. I was actually just looking for a store to buy one. He glanced around. Still new to the city, so, any tips? Tyler blinked, momentarily stunned. Then, without warning, she burst into laughter. Before Ashbourne could react, she grabbed his hand. Well, I know this city like I've lived here my whole life, Tyler said confidently. Then, with a playful smirk, she added, but I gotta admit, if I'd known you were gonna turn out this handsome back then, I definitely would have married you. Ashbourne let out an awkward laugh, unsure if she was actually flirting or just joking. Then again, she had just asked him out, right? That's right, he was handsome. So, obviously, she wanted to date him. He flashed a charming smile. Well, I am single. Want to change that? Tyler froze for a second, then quickly let go of his hand. Oh my God, I didn't mean it like that, Tyler said quickly. Ashbourne felt a tiny part of him die inside. If she wasn't flirting, then what the hell was all that? But he recovered fast, forcing out a laugh. Ha ha, obviously, I was just messing with you. No need to take it so seriously. Tyler let out a small sigh of relief before turning to lead the way. Though, she didn't take his hand again. They arrived at the Apple Store, where Ashbourne wasted no time placing his order. The latest MacBook, iPhone, and PC, he grabbed everything top of the line. With a single swipe of his card, the transaction was done. In record time, he walked out, bags in hand. I just need to activate my phone, then I can get your number, Ashbourne said with a smile, already heading toward the T-Mobile store nearby. Once inside, he quickly signed up for the highest tier plan for his new iPhone. A few minutes later, the phone activated, and he finally got Tyler's number. Haha, look at that, I'm your first, Tyler teased with a playful laugh, noticing that hers was the first number saved in Ashbourne's phone. Ashbourne chuckled along with her, but deep down, he was taking notes. Just because a girl seemed interested didn't mean she actually was. I'm already late for work, Tyler said with a smile. Can't wait for our little date. Ashbourne laughed at her joke and watched as she walked away. He let out a small sigh once she was gone. He had made a friend. And somehow, that made today feel a little more special. Why are you so happy? Ember asked, walking beside Ashbourne, several shopping bags hovering behind her. Ashbourne's smile immediately vanished the moment he saw just how much she had bought. I decided that choosing is for children, Ember said casually. Since I'm an adult, I just bought whatever caught my interest. Ashbourne's eye twitched. You're not an adult, Ashbourne said, deadpan. You're the ancestor of the concept of ancestors. You're so old, back in my day, stories happened before the concept of time even existed. A vein popped on Ember's forehead. How old was she? Old enough that even the living tribunal and the primordial void came after her. She had existed before the one above all had even thought of creating existence, but she smirked instead of snapping back. That's funny, she said smoothly. Because I'm not alone, but you only have your shadows, which is pretty much forced enslavement. Ashbourne froze. He hadn't been expecting that. Haha, my dear Ember, Ashbourne said, smirking. You're underestimating me. I just made a friend, and guess what? She's not trying to go on a date with me or anything like that. He proudly held up his phone, Tyler's number displayed on the screen. Ember glanced at it. I doubt that, she said flatly. You were into zombies. With that, she turned and walked off, leaving Ashbourne momentarily stunned. Then his expression darkened. He wasn't into zombies, he just expected his charm to transcend everything and even have zombies simping for him. Why is a flat-chested chicken buying a bra? He snapped, storming after her. I'm shocked you haven't slept with your shadows, Ember bit back. Ashbourne winced. Just what kind of person did she think he was? Oh, that's rich coming from the chicken who loses her mind over chocolate, he shot back. They glared at each other for a long moment, the tension thick, before Ember simply sneered and strode ahead. Leaving Ashbourne fuming. You have an interesting search history, Ember said casually. Ashbourne immediately admitted defeat. His mouth snapped shut, and he stared straight ahead, locking his gaze on the mansion like it was the only thing that mattered. Then, Ember smirked. It was a cold and evil smile. What's a futa? She asked. Ashbourne froze. Cold sweat prickled at his forehead. When Ember had bonded with him, she'd gained access to parts of his mind. Not everything, of course, or she would have already known what a Nami was. But she had seen enough. And judging by Ashbourne's reaction, she had just found her trump card. Ember's smirk vanished the instant she saw the phone in Ashbourne's hand. On the screen, a video played. A very specific video. Of her, completely losing her mind, screaming for chocolate like a rabid addict. Ashbourne's lips curled into a slow, satisfied smirk. Would be a shame if the multiverse, and beyond, got to see this back home. Silence. They stood there, locked in a tense standoff. Then, simultaneous action. Ember erased every trace of Ashbourne's search history, and more, leaving behind clear evidence that she had erased it from memory. Meanwhile, Ashbourne warped reality itself, ensuring that no recording, no data, not even a trace of that video existed anywhere. He even went as far as to erase that moment from reality itself. A mutual, unspoken agreement. Some things were never meant to be seen. Chapter 54 Inches. Wow, I thought you guys were done improving the house. Ashbourne stepped into Phoenix Manor, only to stop dead in his tracks. He had expected luxury. After all, before he left, the place already made Wakanda look advanced. But now it made Wakanda look like a kid's sandbox project. Everything was sleeker, more efficient, more alive with power and design far beyond Earth's comprehension. Of course not. We have to keep improving, said one of the shadow scientists, adjusting his glasses with pride. Yes, another shadow scientist chimed in, pushing up his glasses with a smug grin. We may not be as smart as the doctor, but when we combine our minds, we create tech so advanced, people mistake it for magic. He paused mid-boast, his eyes landing on the bag in Ashbourne's hands. His expression shifted into disgust. What? Ashbourne asked, glancing down at the shopping bags. My lord, the scientist said seriously, you're a monarch. You should only equip yourself with things worthy of a monarch. Ashbourne shrugged. It's just a phone and a laptop. Chill. Clearly, Ashbourne didn't care. He glanced toward Ember, who had already wandered inside, completely ignoring the exchange. Arms full of bags, clearly ready to try on everything she bought. Ashbourne was pulled back to the present as his shadows nearly jumped him, snatching the bags from his hands and rushing inside to begin dissecting and upgrading the contents. He let out a light sigh but didn't protest. He simply stepped into Phoenix Manor and waited. Moments later, the shadows returned, scientists at the front, heads bowed, visibly frustrated. My lord, one of them said solemnly, we dare say we are not yet worthy to craft devices that match your greatness. Another stepped forward. Please, fuse us. Let us evolve, to be more capable. Ashbourne stared at them, speechless. These were the same shadows who, individually, were smarter than Franklin Richards. To put it in perspective, imagine Franklin Richards, but with an advanced superpower or device that amplifies his already godlike intelligence. Now multiply that by thousands, all of them linked, working as one collective mind. And they were claiming they weren't good enough. Ashbourne honestly didn't know whether to be impressed, or terrified. I don't really need some kind of superphone or anything, Ashbourne said with a casual wave of his hand. But his shadows were determined to please him. So, with a sigh, he gave in and fused them, if only to make them happy. Still, as he carried out the fusion, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his limitation. Only 5 shadows could be fused at once. If he could fuse more, if he could go beyond that cap, he could create the strongest life form his shadow army had ever seen. The thought made him sigh again. With nothing left to do, he closed his eyes, and waited for midnight. And when it came, it brought more than just silence. A familiar chime echoed in his mind. Mission complete. I'm now your leader. Objective. Convince the world's leaders, without using mind control, to make you the leader of the Justice League. Reward. Training dimension, shadow fusing V3. Punishment. None. Training dimension, a special shadow dimension where you control everything. You decide how fast or slow time moves. 1 second outside could feel like years inside. You can also create any item you imagine. In this space, you're like a god. Your imagination is the only limit. Shadow fusing V3. You can now fuse as many shadows as you want with no limit. However, for the best results, it's important to fuse shadows that have similar or compatible skills. If you mix shadows with skills that don't work well together, it could lead to unstable or negative effects. Well, that's just what I needed, Ashbourne thought with a smile. Just a moment ago, he had wished for the limitation on shadow fusing to be removed. Now, it was. Ashbourne stood up, and with a single thought, he entered the shadow dimension. He found himself in a world of complete darkness, endless, silent, and still, and yet, he glowed faintly. Somehow, he could see himself perfectly, his presence the only light in the void. Ashbourne thought of weights, and in an instant, they formed from the surrounding darkness. Their color was different, distinct from the shadows, making them easy to see as if they were bathed in light. He reached for one, picturing it to be as heavy as a star. The result was immediate. His body was spaghettified, stretched, and pulled toward the weight by its overwhelming force. But with a single thought, the weight returned to normal. Using Shadow Monarch force, Ashbourne calmly reformed his body as if nothing had happened. So, there's no real limit to what I can do here. Even if I can't do it with my current strength, Ashbourne said lightly, glancing toward the outside world. He nodded to himself, satisfied. He had already adjusted the time ratio. 1 trillion years inside the dimension now equaled just 1 second outside. In other words, no time had passed in the real world. System, Ashbourne said calmly, can you unlock all of my shadows from Marvel? Just with their strength limited for now. Those shadows had died before he acquired Undying Shadow, but he was still able to keep them in a sealed state thanks to the skill's reach across time. Well, they were not really sealed, more like they were recovering. Still, he missed having his strongest shadows by his side. Host shouldn't be too greedy. The shadow temporarily buffed Undying Shadow so it could affect your past shadows. The host only needs to wait 5 days for the shadows to revive in a weakened state. From there, you can either give them your MP to speed up recovery or let them recover on their own. The system's voice echoed calmly. Ashbourne sighed, then nodded. I didn't mean to come off as greedy. Thanks, he said softly. He rarely asked the system for anything. In truth, he hardly ever complained. He was grateful. By the way, I never really asked you this, Ashbourne said, pulling out his food generation bag. As he spoke, he created food most people could only dream of tasting and casually began to eat. But, are you alive or something? Yes, the system does have consciousness. Ashbourne paused mid-bite, stunned. Now I feel bad, he muttered. I mean, I'm late, but, do you want a name? He leaned back, already thinking. And no, the system is okay with just being called system. Ashbourne frowned. Really, are you sure? No one wants to be called a system. How about voice? He smiled, clearly impressed with himself. You're the voice in my head, it fits. It's subtle hinting at your origin, it's cool, mysterious, it's perfect. The system is extremely happy with the name, system. Please don't. Ashbourne sighed. How could it pass up such a good name? What are you eating? Ember suddenly appeared beside Ashbourne, causing him to nearly jump out of his skin. Instinctively, his hand twitched, almost striking out before he caught himself. He had been too caught up talking to the system to sense her approach. After all, creating such a perfect name wasn't easy. Ember gave him a disdainful look, unimpressed by how easily he had flinched. She didn't say anything, but she definitely made a mental note of it. Ashbourne narrowed his eyes at her, already sensing her judgment. It's not chocolate, Ashbourne said dryly. Also, you're a normal human now. When was the last time you ate? Ember snorted lightly, looking away. She hadn't eaten in a while, not since the chocolate incident, anyway. After that, it was hard to even think about food. Still, she had been hungry all day. But her pride wouldn't let her ask for anything. She wasn't here to ask for food, of course. She just happened to be passing by, and asked what he was eating out of boredom. That was all. Well, I'm eating nothing, Ashbourne said calmly, completely ignoring her. Ember frowned, her eyes drifting to the bag. She opened and closed her hands, fighting the urge, but was losing. Just as she was about to reach for it, Ashbourne picked up the bag, pulled out a pizza box, and handed it to her without a word. She stared at it. Is it chocolate pizza? She asked softly. Ashbourne blinked, then looked at her like she'd just committed a war crime. What? Ember asked, genuinely confused by his reaction. You don't put chocolate on pizza, Ashbourne said with a frown. That's worse than putting pineapple on it. Ember frowned right back. Have you ever eaten chocolate pizza? She asked. Ashbourne didn't even hesitate. No, because it shouldn't exist. Which it doesn't. Which, now that he thought about it, was strange. He was in the United States. How had no one turned that into a thing yet? Then why are you judging something you've never tried? Ember asked flatly. Ashbourne opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no comeback. Chapter 55 Bonus Chapter. You're not even using that bag to its full potential, Ember said, trying to sound calm and reasonable. You're wasting it. Just give it to me. I'll hold on to it. She kept her expression neutral, but the subtle tremble in her hands, reminding Ashbourne of an old addict, gave her away. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow. Yeah, no, if I handed that to you, you'd end up with one hell of a big back. Without another word, he tossed the bag into his shadow. Ember stared at him, unblinking. You know, I can make it so the food is healthy, Ember said, her voice a little strained as she slowly started to lose grip on her mental state. Ashbourne didn't even look at her. The silence was infuriating. Ember gritted her teeth, fists clenched. She tried to stay composed, tried. But in the end, she almost broke down. I need some chocolate, she said, voice trembling. Just this once. I won't ask for more. Her pride crumbled. Because what was pride, compared to chocolate? Oh, would you also date me for it? Ashbourne asked mockingly. Ember suddenly came to a stop. She blinked. Once, twice, then turned around and walked away without a word. And in that moment, a small part of Ashbourne died inside. Sure, it was a joke, but that reaction. That was too much. Before he could even process it, a voice spoke beside him. My lord, don't mind that stupid chicken. I will gladly date you, said a shadow ant humanoid, suddenly kneeling at Ashbourne's side with bright, hopeful eyes. He wasn't alone. A whole swarm of ant people gathered around, staring at Ashbourne, patiently waiting for him to choose. Oh, that won't be necessary, Ashbourne said, waving them off. Instead, I want to give you all a mission. The ants instantly stood at attention, posture sharp and ready. These weren't ordinary ants anymore. Once normal insects, they had bathed in his energy and evolved far beyond their old forms, those very same old forms that could already catch Ember's attacks. Spread out across the world, Ashbourne commanded. I want 1 billion ants brought to me. Dead ants are preferred, but live ones will do. Just make sure no ant colonies are slaughtered. Once you gather them, revive them as shadows. His voice was calm but absolute. I will fuse every last one, to create the Ant King. I'll call him Meruem. Every ant's eyes lit up with joy. But for this to work, Ashbourne continued calmly, I want each of you to bring me 100 ants alive. I'll bless those ants with power, something that will evolve into the Ant King's strongest ability. Consider it a foundation. He paused for a moment, then added, also, I want to experiment with an ant queen. Locate all the lifeless bodies of ant queens around the world, and bring them to me. I'll revive them as shadows too. Ashbourne could warp reality and grant unique powers with ease. And when it came to ants, altering their reality was laughably simple. Giving 100 ants power. That was nothing to him. Understood. You heard him. We're all going to evolve into the Ant King Meruem. One of the ants shouted. The rest roared in joy, their excitement echoing across the manor. Then, in an instant, they all teleported away, spreading across the planet like a wave. It took only seconds. Ashbourne felt it. Over 1 billion ants being brought back as shadows. Each one passed through Shadow Preservation V3, emerging stronger than they had ever been in life. They should have been massive, but they compressed their forms, shrinking down. And now, billions of them knelt before Ashbourne, silent and loyal. Ashbourne looked at the 100 living ants that had been brought before him. He raised his hand, palm open, and with a simple gesture, blessed them. He gifted them a power, the ability to gain the abilities of anything they consumed. They didn't need to devour an entire body, just a drop was enough. Even a single drop of Superman's blood would be all they needed to gain his power, although weakened. Ashbourne lowered his hand, his eyes sharp. Tell me your powers, he said calmly, addressing the shadows of the 100 living ants. At his command, the living ants' shadows came to life, each one rising to stand on one knee, bowing before their sovereign, completely ignoring their living selves. Anything we eat, we gain the power of what we eat. We don't even need the full body, just enough DNA, the 100 ants said in perfect unison. Ashbourne smirked. He held full mastery over shadows. They were bound to his will, absolute in their loyalty. He didn't need to give orders twice. If he desired something, they would move. He was their sovereign. The very idea of defying his will was unthinkable. Then die, and arise, Ashbourne commanded. The moment the words left his mouth, the ants' shadows exploded outward, swallowing their living bodies whole. In the next breath, all 100 ants were reborn, now shadow soldiers, kneeling before their sovereign. They entered Shadow Preservation V3, disappearing for only a second, and when they returned, they were no longer the same. They were far stronger, more capable, and even their abilities had evolved. After grasping the power of Death of the Endless, Ashbourne's Shadow Monarch force had grown even stronger. When shadows bathed in that force, especially within Shadow Preservation V3, they evolved instantly. Time meant nothing inside. The moment they entered, they changed. Ashbourne looked at the 100 enhanced shadow ants before him. Fuse, he said calmly. The shadows obeyed without hesitation. The 100 ants merged into one. No energy release, no wild surges. Ashbourne had mastered his abilities. There would be no ripple across the world, no flashy spectacle. Everything was controlled, concentrated, and precise, focused entirely on the fusion. Name: Shadow Antex 100 Race. Super Shadow Ants Titles. Non-combat capability. Universal plus mid-omniversal with piercing attack class and skills job class. Uprising Ant King skills. None job class skills. Consumptive replication. Can even see their stat screen. Not bad, Ashbourne thought with a smile. The fused ant was truly strong. Sadly, it only reached Universal Plus, which wasn't enough to destroy a universe in the 600th world, where universes held infinite dimensions. Still, it was a promising start. After this fusion, Ashbourne said, smiling, "You shall all be reformed as Meruem, the Ant King. After that, I'll begin work on creating your Ant Queen." At his words, the ants began to tremble, unable to contain their restlessness. "Fuse," Ashbourne said. At his command, the bodies of the 100 ants liquefied, flowing toward one another like molten metal. They merged, reshaped, and solidified, forming a towering, super ant that dropped to one knee before Ashbourne. Its body was covered in a hardened shell, fused with the legendary Shadow Monarch ore. Its eyes glowed a piercing light blue. Razor-sharp wings extended from its back, humming with energy. Its mandibles gleamed, sharp enough to pierce any defense, magical or physical. Even in its weakened state, its combat capability was already at mid-omniversal level, thanks to its piercing specialization. One would be a fool to underestimate the power of Shadow Monarch ore. Thanks to their armor, all of Ashbourne's shadows, even in a weakened state, were practically indestructible. They were like Captain America, except instead of holding a shield, they were wearing it. Except for the ants. They didn't need armor. Their exoskeletons were forged from Shadow Monarch ore itself. And now, standing before Ashbourne, name: Meruem Race. Ant King titles. Ant King combat capability. Multiversal plus mid-omniversal with piercing attack class and skills job class. Ant King skills. None job class skills. Devour Ant King. As the king of ants, you have the power to command any ant to obey your will. As long as the target is weaker than you, their loyalty is absolute. Devour, you have the power to devour anything and gain the abilities of what you consume. You don't need the full body, just a drop of DNA is enough. Chapter 56. After creating the Ant King, Ashbourne turned his attention to the Ant Queen. He wanted to see if it was possible to create a shadow that could actually give birth. In solo leveling, that wasn't possible. But Ashbourne was different. He could warp reality. And what was reality warping? It was like taking control of the story itself, writing whatever you wanted into existence. You could turn a table into a tiger, rewrite logic, reshape physics, redefine the rules. It was like holding a pen and scribbling new truths onto reality. Ashbourne's goal was simple. He wanted shadow ants that could birth other shadow ants. Unfortunately, he quickly realized that such a feat was beyond his current power. If he could grasp more of the Death of the Endless, his Shadow Monarch force would grow stronger, and maybe then, it would be possible. For now, he set the idea aside. Leaving Meruem to enter the training dimension for further growth, Ashbourne headed to the Watchtower, where the Justice League was already waiting. "You're late," Batman said with narrowed eyes. Ashbourne simply nodded. I got distracted with a new dimension I created, Ashbourne said calmly. A place where you can train for 1,000,000,000 years, and only 1 second passes in the outside world. The room went quiet, everyone visibly shocked. But Ashbourne didn't linger on it. Now, he continued, let's get to the real reason I called you here. He raised a hand, and with a thought, a board appeared behind him. I want a clear rundown of the villains you've faced since becoming heroes. This way, I can get a better idea of what's likely to come next. First, I want to speak with the guy who has faced the most dangerous enemy, Ashbourne said, eyes scanning the room. His gaze landed on the speedster. Flash, have you faced Reverse Flash? Flash nodded. Yeah, but he's gone. I'm faster than him now. He crossed his arms. After our last battle, there was this explosion of energy, it erased him completely. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow. Villains are never truly dead, Ashbourne said, voice steady. So Reverse Flash is still out there. And next time he shows up, he'll probably be faster than you. Reverse Flash exists to make your life a living hell. The best way to deal with him is, Ashbourne paused for dramatic effect. Be his friend. Make him your sidekick or something. Everyone stared at him, having trouble comprehending what they just heard. The silence was heavy, but as they comprehended Ashbourne's words, the weird looks were thrown at Ashbourne. What? Ashbourne shrugged. None of you want to kill. I'm giving you a way to make sure a villain stays down. Reverse Flash is like the Joker, except he wants to be meaningful in your life. Even if that means being your worst enemy. Everyone sat in stunned silence. Flash frowned, clearly not thrilled by the idea of getting cozy with the man who'd ruined so much of his life. Reverse Flash is from the future, Ashbourne continued. So the version you see. There's always another one coming. One who knows more, one who's seen further ahead. Which means, the bastard can't really die. He shrugged. I do have ways to make sure he stays gone for good, but that's a line we'll cross when you're ready to cross it. Flash gave a small nod in return. Oh, when exactly did he die? Ashbourne asked. Just 6 months ago, Flash replied. The moment he said it, the information appeared on the board behind Ashbourne. From there, Ashbourne went down the line, gathering information from everyone. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and the rest. The heroes normally fought solo, but sometimes, they had to team up. Like with Lex Luthor, when one of them couldn't handle it alone. Other times, they managed to handle threats on their own. Now that your history's laid out, Ashbourne said calmly, eyes scanning the board, the worst thing that could happen, is if these villains joined forces against you. Lex and the others aren't stupid. They adapt, and they'll keep adapting until they figure out how to beat you. He paused. Either that happens, or something new shows up. Something powerful enough not just to fight you, his gaze swept over them, but to kill the hope of this world. The room grew heavy. Everyone frowned, a quiet unease creeping into their expressions. Let's think about this logically, Ashbourne said, voice steady. If I were the darkness, I wouldn't just throw the same villains you've already faced at you. No, I'd throw something new, something capable of killing Superman. He turned his eyes to Clark, who was equipped with a deep frown. Superman was a bit arrogant. What could kill him? When the world loses its Superman, hope becomes a lot easier to crush. Ashbourne snapped his fingers. Instantly, screens lit up around the room, displaying scenes from across the multiverse, each one showing the death of Superman in different worlds. I'll bet this is what's next for this universe, Ashbourne said coldly. Doomsday. A life form born from Krypton, a monster that adapts and becomes immune to whatever kills it. The room fell into silence. Everyone felt, their hearts dropped. How on earth were they going to face a monster like Doomsday? When it arrives, don't hold back, Ashbourne said firmly. Superman usually defeats Doomsday, but only at the cost of his own life. This time, when it shows up, I want 3 people on it from the start. Superman, Shazam, and Wonder Woman. His tone sharpened. And for fucking sake, keep everyone else far away. He looked to Flash and the others. That's your job. Get people clear. Civilians, support, backup, move them. Fast. Your only priority, he said, eyes returning to the 3 powerhouses, is winning that fight. Kill Doomsday as quickly as possible, Because the longer he's alive, the more he'll evolve, and if he adapts too much, you won't be able to stop him. I know my words are pointless, Ashbourne said lightly. You'll all foolishly choose not to kill, and it'll lead to Superman's death. He shrugged. But that's my warning. The room fell silent. Every hero frowned, because Ashbourne was right. Even after everything he'd just said, they still weren't going to listen. They were confident in their own strength. They just needed to be extra careful. How could they lose if they were on high alert? Chapter 57 Inches is Doomsday's weakness kryptonite? Batman asked, eyes narrowed. Yes, Ashbourne replied calmly. He's still weakened by it, just not to the same degree as Superman. And he can eventually adapt to it, becoming immune. Batman's eyes narrowed further, already formulating contingencies in his mind. Ashbourne glanced around. Keep in mind, Doomsday might not be the next danger. It could be Lex Luthor, or something completely unexpected. Just as he finished speaking, his brow lifted as alarms began to blare through the watchtower. Well, I'll let you guys get to work, Ashbourne said casually, his eyes on the screen. It displayed a clear, side-angle camera view of a group of armored individuals attacking the White House. Without hesitation, Superman and a few others took off. This was the biggest event to hit since Ashbourne's arrival. Ashbourne leaned back, choosing to watch the action unfold. There were 5 men in total, each one geared in advanced armor and wielding what looked like alien weaponry. They were bulletproof, shrugging off standard gunfire with ease, though the White House guards had been issued special weapons that could at least dent their armor. Ashbourne watched as Superman and the others arrived on the scene, quickly engaging the armored attackers, but his interest faded just as fast. His attention shifted to Wonder Woman, who had stayed behind. The moment she noticed Ashbourne looking at her, her body stiffened. So, about that date? Ashbourne asked with a smile. Wonder Woman froze for a long moment, completely silent, before finally shaking her head. Sorry, Wonder Woman said, avoiding eye contact. But I believe coworkers shouldn't engage in that kind of relationship. Ashbourne's eye twitched. Damn Ember. She'd clearly lied about his charm. And worse, she'd given him false hope. Wonder Woman, sensing the tension, quickly shifted the topic. About Superman's death, she said, voice quieter now. You spoke about it like you don't plan to step in and help. Ashbourne seized the chance to change the subject. Yes, Ashbourne said lightly. I'd prefer to avoid drawing the darkness's attention when I can. So I'll only step in when the benefits outweigh the risk. Even if Superman dies, Wonder Woman asked, her brow furrowed deeply. Ashbourne paused, thinking it over. It would depend on how things played out, Ashbourne said with a sigh. I'd rather you all see it for yourselves. Wonder Woman looked away, clearly disappointed. It was only natural to assume that if Superman wasn't guaranteed to be saved, she wouldn't be either. It's the main reason she just rejected Ashbourne. It came from not knowing Ashbourne well enough yet. At the end of the day, they could very well be enemies tomorrow. His willingness to let his allies die was something she couldn't accept, but a part of her was willing to wait and see what Ashbourne was talking about. She didn't care much about the fact that Ashbourne was killed. Sometimes, she too had the urge to kill, but she held herself back. She was a warrior, after all. She'd fought in World War II and had taken many lives. But in modern times, she refrained, not because she couldn't, but because she believed in Superman's words. Superman was the best of them, and every member of the League believed in him fully. It didn't take long for the Justice League to return, though a few members split off to visit Cyborg's father, hoping he could analyze the attacker's armor. That armor, it looked like something straight out of Apocalypse. Batman brought back a damaged piece and handed it to Ashbourne, curious if he knew anything about it. Of course, Ashbourne didn't. He wasn't some all-knowing god. His cosmic awareness pointed him toward Apocalypse, but it didn't explain how humans had gotten their hands on that kind of tech. Still, Ashbourne had a feeling this wasn't Darkseid's doing. If he had to guess, it smelled more like Lex Luthor. Just how easy is it for Luthor to get his hands on stuff like this? Ashbourne asked, eyeing the piece of armor as he turned to Batman. Batman's expression tightened. On the day you arrived on Earth, there was a robbery in Jump City. 5 individuals broke into a bank, he said with a frown. Ashbourne blinked. A bank? Who the hell stores alien tech in a bank? It wasn't the armor that was stored there, Batman said while turning to leave. On the night Darkseid invaded, a fragment of a mother box landed at that location. The owner of the bank not only kept it but actually fought the government in court to make sure it stayed in his possession. And guess who backed him? Wonder Woman narrowed her eyes. Luthor. Batman nodded. With someone like Luthor backing you, there's very little you can't do. He turned to leave, his cape shifting behind him. He didn't need to say more. Luthor hadn't supported that bank owner out of goodwill, he did it to steal the mother box fragment. Now Luthor had it, and he was starting to make his move. As for what his endgame was, not even Batman knew. When someone like Luthor makes a move, it's never random, Ashbourne thought, rubbing his chin. Either he sold that armor to those cannon fodder, or he did it knowing the Justice League would get involved. Was it just a test? He shrugged. He'd done his part for the day, and hopefully, he'd get some action in the following days. It was weird that a whole day happened without any end of the world event playing out. Far away, in the void of space, what looked like an asteroid was hurtling toward Earth at an impossible speed. My lord, you've finally returned. The fused shadow of Ashbourne's brightest minds, now known as Bright Mind, rushed forward, practically vibrating with excitement. In his hands, he held up a phone like it was the Holy Grail. It looked exactly like Ashbourne's old one. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow. Thanks, Bright Mind, he said, taking the phone with a calm nod. Behind Bright Mind stood dozens of other shadows, former citizens of Gotham, all reborn under Ashbourne's command. They had once been ordinary people, but now, their minds had been sharpened to godly levels. They stood proudly behind their leader, eyes gleaming with satisfaction, like students showing off a science project to their favorite teacher. Bright Mind, meanwhile, was bouncing in place, unable to contain himself. My lord, you haven't even begun to see the greatness of this device. He beamed, eyes wide with anticipation. Ashbourne smiled faintly, sensing the excitement. He could easily tell that Bright Mind wanted to tell him everything, so with a nod, he gave permission to speak. Chapter 58 Inches in creating this, we had only one goal, Bright Mind began, his voice trembling with excitement. To ensure that what you held in your hand was the best, across all levels of existence. So, we did 3 things, he said, raising one finger. Step 1. We scoured the entire universe to identify every peak form of technology. Ashbourne raised an eyebrow, skeptical. He had only handed them his old phone a few hours ago. To accomplish this, we, briefly hacked into Cyborg to reverse engineer his tech, Bright Mind admitted with a sheepish smile. Then we infiltrated every highly advanced civilization across the stars, downloaded their collective knowledge, and improved upon it. Bright Mind raised a second finger. Step 2. We expanded our reach into the multiverse. It took us a few minutes, but we successfully gathered and analyzed all relevant multiversal technologies, then filtered and integrated the best of it. He raised a third finger, grinning ear to ear now. Step 3. We made sure that no higher dimensional beings out there had tech more advanced than yours. We looked into the 4th dimension, and shockingly, we already had tech above theirs. So, we moved on to the 5th dimension. There, we found that the dimension seemed to embody imagination itself. They had so much reality warping tech that it was shocking, Bright Mind said happily, all while Ashbourne looked at him with a stunned, speechless expression. Bright Mind went on to explain how he had to enter the training dimension for the next step since he didn't want to make Ashbourne wait. There, he absorbed all forms of knowledge, going as far as touching the source of the DC multiverse. To him, it was easy, after all, the mother box had already done something similar. The difference was that the mother box had limited use of that connection. Meanwhile, Bright Mind managed to create tech that could rival the capabilities of those who drew power directly from the source. By the way, the source is an aspect of the creator of the DC multiverse. So what Bright Mind gave Ashbourne wasn't just a powerful phone, it was a phone capable of doing just about anything Ashbourne wanted it to do. Ashbourne's mouth was wide open. This phone drew upon the same power as someone like Dr. Manhattan. With this phone, he honestly had nothing to fear. This was the problem with smart people, give them time, and they'd do crazy stuff like this. Well, that isn't our best work, my lord, Bright Mind said. That phone there is a jack of all trades, master of none. But if we focused solely on creating something purely for attack, we're confident we could make some crazy things. Ashbourne nodded lightly. Go ahead and begin creating such things. I want all of my shadows equipped with them. But also take into account building tech that doesn't rely on the source for power, Ashbourne said calmly. What would happen if we left this omniverse? He added. Bright Mind's eyes widened. He hadn't thought of that. Understood, Bright Mind said before running off to get to work. Ashbourne wanted to tell him he didn't need to start right away, but he quickly sensed the guy's joy at the challenge ahead. Seeing that this was what the shadow enjoyed, Ashbourne allowed him to do his thing while he sat down on a chair. But Ashbourne didn't even get the chance to see what the phone could do, as he noticed a shadow with glasses standing over him. My lord, after seeing Bright Mind work, I came to realize I've been failing in my duty. The Shadow Monarch should wear only the best and most fashionable clothing in existence. How could I allow you to keep wearing the same thing you had on yesterday? The shadow asked, leaving Ashbourne speechless. He couldn't even respond before another shadow appeared, this one dressed like a chef. My lord, allow me to be your chef. With that bag and my skills, I'm sure I could create magical food worthy of your table. My lord, allow me to look after your garden, and so the list went on. All of them, former normal people, stepped forward, wanting to have their own role to play. They wanted to be useful, since they weren't fighters. Sure, they were now countless times stronger than they had been in life, but even so, they knew their strengths. They wanted to serve in the ways they shined best. Ashbourne couldn't bring himself to say no to them, so he allowed them all to do what they wanted. Although, he was most interested in the chef. What could he do that the food generation bag couldn't already do? Sensing Ashbourne's eyes on him, the shadow chef was instantly fired up. He rushed into the kitchen, using the bag to create the highest quality ingredients he could think of. Then, tapping into every power available to him, the shadow chef began to cook. Forgot that shadows pretty much have infinite energy, so they could just pour a ton of it into the bag to create whatever, so the bag seems to be most useful in their hands, Ashbourne thought, turning his attention back to the phone. What can you do? Ashbourne asked lazily, scrolling through the apps, only to find seemingly nothing worthwhile on the surface. Greetings, Lord Ashbourne. I am Model 1, a prototype for the Shadow Monarch phone that will soon be created for you. Might I know how I can assist you this fine night? Upon hearing Ashbourne's question, the phone suddenly spoke. Well, if you can, mind searching for my armor across the Omniverse? I tried to call it, but it seems too damaged to hear my calls, Ashbourne said lightly. Of course, I've scanned every form of tech across the multiverse, from Earth to the infinite dimensions. I did find traces of your Monarch aura in a few places, but it seems something is actively hiding it. I also scanned the higher dimensions. It was far more difficult, but I did manage to locate small fragments of your armor aura scattered there. Ashbourne was about to respond but paused when the TV in front of him flickered. An image appeared. It showed the Black Lantern, reaching out toward a broken fragment of the ever-changing weapon. This is the only piece of your gear that could be found. But the one who has it, Necron, has disappeared. Some unknown power has taken him away. Ashbourne's expression darkened at the sight. Necron was the last person he wanted touching his power. Darkseid could. Trigon could. Even the Empty Hand could. But Necron, a necromancer empowered by the Shadow Monarch's energy. And let's not forget the primordial storm sealed within that fragment of armor. That was going to be a pain to deal with. Fuck, Ashbourne cursed. He didn't have time for this. He needed to be far more overpowered, strong enough to one-shot these troublesome threats the moment they appeared. The best way to do that? Simple. Recover his strength and grow even stronger. Are you able to recreate a lantern ring? Ashbourne asked. With that, the phone floated out of his hand, hovering over a nearby table. Its camera flickered on, projecting the image of a green lantern ring hovering above the surface. At first, it looked like nothing more than an illusion, until the phone moved aside, and the lantern ring remained, now physically sitting on the table. Create a second one for the pervert secretly watching me, Ashbourne said casually. Ember, who had been quietly watching everything from the stairs, let out a sharp snort and glared at him, clearly not appreciating being called a pervert. Chapter 59 inches. So, With this, I can use my emotions as a weapon. Want to fight, Ashbourne? Ember asked, picking up the ring. She looked at him with clear expectation. Ashbourne, however, simply ignored her, picking up the second lantern ring for himself. My dimension's over there, he said casually. Once you master all the lantern rings, they'll fuse into the white lantern ring. Then he glanced at her, his expression turning sharp. By the way, how weak are you that Death of the Endless could enter Marvel and return, yet you find yourself stuck here? Ashbourne looked at her with disdain, and Ember's face darkened. Zombie lover, do you want to test my new ring's power? Ember asked, her body now glowing with a faint green light. Oh, is it going to take us home? Ashbourne replied mockingly. Embodiment of creation and destruction, my ass, more like the embodiment of chickens. You. Ember's face turned red with rage. If this were a cultivation novel, she would have already coughed up blood on the spot. But after a moment, she forced herself to calm down. This wasn't the same Ember who had snapped and attacked Ashbourne before. She had far better control over her emotions now. I'm just a fragment of my true form, she said evenly. My authority is tied to my world, while Death of the Endless isn't limited to just one. I have my reasons. Then she gave him a curious look. So tell me, what do you find so attractive about zombies? Ashbourne gritted his teeth lightly. Haha, you two lovebirds. A laugh echoed from the doorway, causing both of them to instantly look over. Standing there was a goth girl, and the moment Ashbourne saw her, he went on full guard. After all, this was Death of the Endless. Can I come in? She asked with a gentle smile. Ashbourne hesitated for only a moment before giving a small nod. Well, I just came by to welcome you to our world, she said lightly. It's not every day someone as powerful as you step in from next door. It's usually the weaker ones. Her gaze shifted toward Ember, who was already glaring at her. But she just answered Ember with a gentle friendly smile. Oh good, I thought you came to kill me or something, Ashbourne said with a smile. So, want to take me home? Of course, he'd leave DC. He didn't want to stick around babysitting heroes. What about your gear? Death asked, causing Ashbourne to pause. I'm guessing you're not going to get it for me. Ashbourne asked with a depressed look. To that, Death nodded with a playful smile. I wouldn't mind helping you out, she said with a laugh, but I was told to stay out of the way. It's not every day I get orders I actually have to follow. She genuinely found it funny. Normally, she was free to do whatever she pleased, strong enough, old enough, with little to no one above her, except when it came to helping Ashbourne. I'm guessing you're talking about the presence? Ashbourne asked. She nodded. Just what is his connection with the one above all? Why would he allow Ashbourne to come here and cause trouble for his world? Ember asked with a frown, earning a glare from Ashbourne. She made it sound like he chose to come here. Oh, that's simple, Death said lightly. They're the same being. Both are fragments of his omnipotence. Ember froze, shocked, unable to fully process the weight of that truth. Ashbourne, on the other hand, just stood there, clueless to how massive this revelation truly was. But to Ember, this changed everything. The true might of the one above all was far greater than she had ever imagined. I think we should talk more about this over a meal, free tomorrow. Ashbourne asked. Ember's hand shot forward to slap him, but Ashbourne easily dodged it. Sure, Death chimed in casually smile. Would you like the meal to happen before or after your date with Tyler? Ember immediately turned to Ashbourne with a disgusted look. It's not like that. Tyler and I are simply friends. Don't worry, I asked her out and got rejected. She's not after my body. As you can see, I can make friends, Ashbourne said, throwing a sneer at Ember. All I heard is that you got friend-zoned, Ember shot back with a mocking smirk. First the zombies, then the shadows, and now this. Oh, let's not forget how you got rejected by Wonder Woman. Ashbourne opened his mouth to reply, then closed it. What could he say here? It's like watching two couples fighting, Death said with a light laugh, causing both Ember and Ashbourne to throw a glare her way. Who would want to date this zombie-loving creep? Ember snorted. Oh, shut up. Who would want to date you? Ashbourne shot back with a cold snort of his own. The two locked eyes, Death glares meeting in the middle. While Death fanned herself, amused at how much attraction the two were giving off. Well, I should get out of you two's hair. Remember to use protection, Death said with a teasing smile before disappearing, just as Ember's fist swung through the space where she had been. Protection. I bet that thing is so small it makes worms look huge, Ember snapped angrily, making Ashbourne raise an eyebrow. First of all, aren't worms your favorite snack? And second, Ashbourne's pants dropped to the ground. Ember immediately had to shield her eyes as a blinding light exploded out toward her. She squinted through it, trying to see what on earth was giving off such a glow, and when she did, she was shocked. Impossible. How could it be so big? Ember asked, horrified by the sight before her. Ashbourne laughed pridefully. A real man wasn't afraid to pull down his pants and prove a woman wrong. Now, small would be the last word Ember would ever associate with him. Ashbourne pulled his pants back up and casually made his way upstairs, leaving Ember frozen in place, speechless. The image of that dragon was now burned into her mind. Only then did she realize the true extent of Ashbourne's charm stat. Even his dragon was affected. Oh wait, I wanted to watch TV. Ashbourne suddenly returned, sitting down in front of the screen while speaking into his phone. Hey, Siri, find me a multiverse that has One Piece. It's an anime about finding a treasure called the One Piece. I have found an infinite number of multiverses with an anime of similar name and plot. Please select from the list below. An anime about a man named Blackbeard, also known as Marshall D. Teach. It follows his ruthless journey to find the One Piece. A true pirate, he's willing to do anything to turn his dreams into reality. An anime centered on Sakazuki. After losing his wife, he is saved by Shanks and inherits the dream of becoming Pirate King. He sets sail to find the One Piece, fighting the evil world government and one of its elites, Monkey D. Luffy. This one may be of interest. The anime follows Monkey D. Luffy, a cheerful young man with a straw hat who sets off to explore the sea in search of the One Piece and to become Pirate King. Along the way, he laughs, cries, and grows, always with his crew by his side. Point 4, the list continued endlessly. And honestly, Ashbourne wanted to watch all of them. Since the multiverse was endless, there should be a POV version from every major One Piece character across the multiverse. The third one, do you want to watch it? Ashbourne asked Ember. This is my favorite anime, and art isn't meant to be kept to oneself. It's meant to be shared. Ember glared at him. The image of that dragon still burned into her mind, but after a moment, she nodded, sitting far away from him as the episode started. That distance didn't last. As soon as the Shadow Chef finished preparing a meal truly worthy of the gods, Ember found herself slowly drifting closer. And the meal. It was divine. The smell alone was something no mortal sense could withstand. Ember's mind nearly snapped trying to process it. Her mortal body couldn't handle it. She was forced to destroy it, returning to her phoenix form just to survive the experience. Even then, the food was so high level, so transcendent, that a living embodiment like her could enjoy it. Ashbourne called it conceptual food, since the phoenix force was a living concept. She moved to try the food, only for the Shadow Chef to slap her hand away. He threw a death glare, filled with fury that someone would dare attempt to eat before his lord. Take on a more human-like form. I will not tolerate such low-table manners in the presence of the Lord. The chef barked, his voice sharp with authority. The phoenix force almost exploded with rage. Since when did she, the embodiment of rebirth and destruction, need manners? But despite the heat burning behind her eyes, she still shifted into a humanoid form and took a seat at the table, albeit with visible annoyance. Before her was a feast, a mountain of food so vast it filled the entire table, dishes of every flavor, color, and aroma imaginable. Enjoy, my lord. I have pushed the bag to its absolute limit, the chef said proudly. This meal was made using only the finest resources the bag could produce, and I've used every ounce of my skill to bring out their maximum potential. Ashbourne gave him a thankful nod, to which the chef bowed deeply before happily returning to the kitchen to clean up. I feel a little rude. Should I have invited Death to stay? Ashbourne muttered, glancing at the food in front of him. But the moment he blinked, Death was suddenly sitting right next to him. Well, since you offered, Death said with a smile. Ashbourne gave her a blank stare in return. To that, Death responded with an awkward shrug. Food this good doesn't exist here. It's worth me being a little shameless. Besides, you called this anime art, and so did that phone of yours. I want to see it for myself. Ashbourne let out a sigh. It would be a sin to deny someone the chance to watch One Piece. And Ashbourne had no intention of being a sinner. There were lines even he wouldn't cross, and forbidding someone from watching One Piece. That was pure evil. Ashbourne had watched a lot of art back in his day. Anime truly stood out. Chapter 60, so, that's the Nami you were talking about. Is there some zombie devil fruit she's going to eat or something? The Phoenix Force asked, her tone laced with sarcasm. A vein popped on Ashbourne's forehead. When was she going to let the whole zombie thing go? Everything had been going perfectly. God-tier food, his favorite anime, and the ideal vibe. That is, until the Phoenix Force realized who Nami was. He ignored her, choosing instead to focus on the anime, or at least half focus. Sure, the animation was leagues better than what he remembered from his past life, and the visuals were almost divine now, but Ashbourne already knew the story. This was a rewatch for him. So, with his attention split, he turned to his phone, determined to explore exactly what this new creation was truly capable of. Morning came. As Ashbourne started to get up to dress for the day, he heard a faint sniff, followed by a subtle wave of killing intent. He looked up, only to see Death quietly wiping a tear from her eye. He turned toward the Phoenix Force. She was doing the same. Confused, Ashbourne glanced at the TV. On-screen, Nami was in tears, stabbing the tattoo on her arm over and over again. It was that scene. The one every One Piece fan knew. An emotional moment made even more powerful after the heartbreaking backstory they had just finished watching. Ashbourne blinked. He had wondered why they'd gotten so quiet. But now it was clear why they were hooked. I have to go, I've got a date, Ashbourne said as he paused the anime, right as the main character stepped in to stop Nami from hurting herself. Two glares immediately locked onto him. One from the Phoenix Force, sharp and cold. The other from Death, softer, but still unnerving. You can leave. We'll stay here and keep watching, the Phoenix Force said coolly, not even looking at him. Meanwhile, Death stared off into space, a thoughtful expression on her face. She'd taken on mortal form before, many times, for many reasons. But this might be the most human she'd ever made herself, all for the sake of watching anime. Was this a good idea? A part of her wanted to leave this omniverse entirely and start searching for the world of One Piece. After seeing Nami's mother, after witnessing how Nami grew up, something inside her stirred. The flood of emotion had overwhelmed her, and now she needed an outlet, some way to vent the feelings pressing against her chest. When mortals watch something emotional, something that moves them so deeply it makes them want to leap into the screen, they have no choice but to turn their rage towards the storyteller. But Death of the Endless. She could just step outside, and find that world. And that made her wonder, was it wise to let herself indulge in stories like this? To let her humanity run so deep that fiction could make her feel this much? Should she pull back, lessen her humanity a little? But if she did, she wouldn't be able to enjoy it. No, control those emotions first, Ashbourne said calmly, seeing the tension in the room. Death is giving off a deadly aura, and you might do something stupid. You two were never truly human, so it might do you some good to master the art of self-control. With that, he casually formed a toothbrush from the shadows and began walking toward the door. But someone stepped into his path. My lord, the shadow said sternly, eyes filled with displeasure, you weren't actually planning to step outside wearing the same clothes you've had on for the past few days, were you? Don't worry, it's still clean, Ashbourne said, waving his hand dismissively, seeing nothing wrong with it. But the shadow's expression only darkened. He was clearly displeased, disappointed that his master might actually be the kind of person who'd wear the same clothes for weeks. Without another word, Ashbourne was dragged away, leaving the Phoenix Force and Death sitting in thoughtful silence. After a while, Death of the Endless stood up. Take care, she said softly to the Phoenix Force before teleporting away. She had things to confirm. There was already a theory forming in her mind, that Ashbourne was going to do something significant. But now, she was certain. And whatever it was, it would drag her into it. Whether that was a good thing or not, she didn't know. Isn't it a bit too dark? Ashbourne asked, eyeing the black suit he was now dressed in. It was darker than any normal suit, so dark it seemed to absorb light. It hugged his frame perfectly, making him look larger, stronger, and, thankfully, drawing attention away from what he still believed was his ugly face. "My lord, trust me, this is perfect," said the shadow stylist, who Ashbourne had begrudgingly come to call Fashion. Fashion's eyes glowed with pride, like a little girl who had just dressed her favorite doll in the prettiest gown imaginable. Ashbourne sighed and let it go. There was no point in arguing. He made his way to the restaurant where he and Tyler had planned to meet. They had been texting back and forth, setting a time and place while watching One Piece, but what caught him off guard was that Tyler was already there, waiting for him. Awkwardly, Ashbourne made his way to the table and sat down across from Tyler, who was already watching him with a stunned look. She wasn't the only one. The entire restaurant seemed to pause, eyes drifting toward him, conversations quieting, as if his presence had pulled gravity toward their table. "Sorry," Ashbourne said with a small, sheepish smile. "I was forced to overdress." Then he glanced at her, his gaze softening. "You look amazing, by the way. I never knew a red dress could look that good on someone." Tyler let out a soft laugh and waved him off playfully. "Well, I never knew black could suit someone so well, until now," Tyler said with a warm smile. She glanced around the restaurant, noting how many people were struggling not to stare. Ashbourne's suit felt like a black hole, quietly pulling attention toward him, elegant, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. But the suit wasn't the real problem. It was his face, otherworldly, almost heavenly. Still, she looked back at him, her tone shifting. "Anyway, I wanted to talk to you about high school." Her voice softened. "I don't really remember much. A few years ago, I just found myself here. My memory was all fuzzy. I was hoping you could tell me if I had a family or something." Ashbourne froze, eyes widening slightly in shock. "I know I could probably ask one of those superheroes for help," Tyler said, her voice light but tinged with unease. "I mean, this isn't my world, so I'm sure I could get their attention, but I don't want some green alien digging around in my head, you know." She gave a small, sad smile. "It just feels like fate that we ran into each other. I mean, what are the chances?" Ashbourne blinked, unsure what to say at first. "Oh, well, we weren't really close back then," he admitted. "But you were the quiet nerd," he continued, sharing everything he could remember, small details, fragments of the past. And Tyler listened carefully, her expression intent as she soaked up every word, like someone trying to rebuild a life from scattered pieces. But the quiet moment didn't last. Tyler's eyes flicked instinctively toward the window, and widened in horror. A gun, aimed straight at the restaurant. She moved without thinking. In one fluid motion, she knocked over the food, tackled Ashbourne to the ground, and covered him with her body. Just as bullets shattered the glass and tore through the air, Ashbourne was caught completely off guard. How could he not be, with Tyler's chest pressed against his face? But the surreal moment shattered when he heard a sharp, pained moan, and felt something warm and wet drip onto his shoulder. He looked up. Tyler was smiling down at him, trying to act like nothing was wrong. But her face was pale, and her shoulder, bleeding. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, the pain clear in her voice despite the brave smile. "You're injured," Ashbourne said sharply. He quickly flipped them over and gently laid her down on the ground. With a simple thought, a dark glow pulsed from his hand, and Tyler's eyes widened in disbelief as the pain vanished. Her wound closed instantly, leaving not even a scar behind. Ashbourne stood slowly, his expression cold as ice. He looked toward the man approaching the entrance, gun still in hand, intent clear. "Die," Ashbourne said flatly. The would-be attacker froze, just for a second, before he and the others collapsed, lifeless, like puppets with their strings cut. "Arise." A wave of darkness swept out. From it, 5 shadows rose, kneeling before Ashbourne in perfect silence. "What were you after?" Ashbourne asked coldly, his voice like steel. One of the shadows, the former leader, stepped forward and bowed slightly. "We were hired to attack you, force you to use your powers, then retreat," he said, tone respectful, eyes cast downward. Ashbourne's gaze narrowed. "Who hired you?" "That, we do not know. They ensured we had no way of tracing them. We even had to conduct the background check on you ourselves just to track your location." The shadow sighed in shame. Ashbourne's frown deepened. He turned slowly, looking toward Tyler, and paused. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear, but not of the attackers. Of him. Ashbourne started to step forward but hesitated, the fear in Tyler's eyes freezing him in place. He remembered Ember's words, the reminder that he was no longer mortal, that he stood on a different plane now. They were from two different worlds entirely, and no amount of kindness could bridge that gap. Still, it stung more than he expected. He had genuinely thought they could at least be friends. Just as he turned to walk away, Tyler's voice broke through the silence. Wait, she called, running up to him and quickly slipping a folded piece of paper into his hand. Ashbourne looked at it, then at her, confusion etched into his features as he slowly unfolded it. 3 addresses were written across the page in careful handwriting. He glanced back up at her, eyebrows slightly raised. The first one is my address, but you can't stay there, seeing as people know we know each other. Those other 2 addresses are abandoned places where you can hide out. I'll stop by to bring you food and other stuff. Now, hurry and run before the police come, or worse, the Justice League, Tyler said in a low, soft voice. This caused Ashbourne to look at her with a weird expression. A second ago, she was frozen in fear, and now she was helping him. Don't worry about this. I won't get in trouble, Ashbourne said with a smile. His smile widened at the confused look in Tyler's eyes, but he didn't explain. He simply snapped his fingers, restoring the restaurant to its original state while healing everyone who had been injured. Under Tyler's uneasy gaze, Ashbourne grabbed her hand and pulled her along to find something else to do. When the police arrived, he simply showed them his license to kill, and after giving them a rundown of what had happened, they had no choice but to let him go. With that settled, Ashbourne returned to his date, though it wasn't really a date, since they were just friends. Still, now that Tyler knew about his powers, Ashbourne figured there was no reason to limit themselves. They could go anywhere on Earth. Chapter 61 Death of Superman. Boom. What seemed to be an asteroid slammed through a space shuttle, instantly killing the astronauts on board. Hal and John, the 2 Green Lanterns, reacted quickly, trying to stop the asteroid with barriers and attacks. But it was moving too fast. Their attacks shattered against it. The asteroid tore through them and continued, slamming into the watchtower, punching straight through it. Alarms blared as the massive structure lost integrity and began plummeting toward Earth. Unlike the asteroid, which had crashed into the ocean, the watchtower was heading straight for land. Superman, Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter, and everyone else capable of flying in outer space gave it everything they had to stop the watchtower from crashing. Meanwhile, heroes like the Flash, Aquaman, and a few others rushed to investigate the impact site in the ocean. But when they arrived, they were met with a bloodbath. Sea creatures were torn to pieces. And scattered among them were the bodies of Atlanteans, ripped apart, their eyes frozen in expressions of pure horror. They managed to follow the traces of whatever had landed on Earth toward land. Along the way, they saw the aftermath. Every living thing that had come within its sight had been killed. Birds lay broken in the trees, deer were torn apart mid-run. If it lived and dared to catch its attention, it was wiped out without a second thought. It was heading toward a nearby town. They moved quickly. Flash arrived first, racing ahead of the others, and what he saw stopped him in his tracks. Police cars were abandoned in the street, some overturned or crushed. Blood painted the pavement. Organs and torn limbs were scattered across the road, and lifeless, ripped-up bodies lay everywhere. It looked less like a crime scene and more like a massacre. It was a sight that made Flash pause. And then he froze completely. Standing in the middle of the street was a gray giant, its massive body covered in jagged bone-like spikes. Doomsday. Flash recognized him immediately. He had seen the images Ashbourne showed them, the ones where Superman lay dead, with this very monster lying nearby. Without wasting another second, Flash vanished, moving at the speed of sound. He reappeared just in time to grab a young woman who was about to be crushed under Doomsday's foot. The monster's eyes snapped toward him. Flash didn't stop. He darted back and forth, zipping through the street, grabbing civilians and pulling them to safety. Anyone too close to Doomsday, gone in a blink. You monster! Hawkgirl shot in from above, slamming her mace straight into Doomsday's face. The blow caught him off guard, sending the gray giant stumbling backward. She didn't let up. Strike after strike landed, each hit forcing Doomsday to take another step back. But the number of steps backwards Doomsday was taking was dropping, he was adjusting. Before he could recover fully, Hawkman dove in from the other side. Together, the two of them landed a series of coordinated blows, their attacks clashing against bone and muscle with brutal force. Ashbourne said, "You were powerful, but I don't see it." Aquaman, enraged by the death of his people, lunged forward. His trident drove toward Doomsday's chest. But it stopped. Doomsday's flesh was like stone, and the dense, unyielding muscle beneath was even worse. The trident barely sank in before being halted entirely. With a deafening roar, Doomsday lashed out. Hawkgirl and Hawkman didn't have time to react. His massive hands caught their attack with both hands, before he slammed them into the ground so hard that the concrete cratered beneath them. Aquaman didn't even get the chance to react. His eyes were still on the crater, filled with shock and concern for Hawkgirl and Hawkman. That's when Doomsday's fist slammed into his gut. The blow launched him like a missile, tearing through the street and sending him crashing into a building with enough force to shatter his bones. Not even Superman had ever hit him that hard. Doomsday reached up, yanked the trident from his chest, and turned back toward the fallen duo. He raised the weapon, aiming to drive it through both of them, but in a blink of lightning, they vanished. Flash appeared beside Aquaman, gently setting the two down. Aquaman was on his knees, coughing, blood running down his side. Doomsday's spiked knuckles had torn clean through his armor. He was trying to slow the bleeding, but it was barely helping. "We just got here, and 3 are already down. We need backup. Now." Flash shouted into the comm, eyes locked on Doomsday, who was already charging straight for him. Thinking fast, Flash grabbed Hawkman's fallen mace. He took a breath, then vanished in a streak of lightning. Doomsday swung, but Flash was already gone. Sliding low, Flash ducked under the behemoth's legs and struck at his knees with the mace, forcing the monster off balance. Then came the storm. Flash exploded into motion, circling Doomsday in a blur of red and gold, striking him from every angle. The air cracked with every hit. Blows landed in flashes so fast, it looked like he was everywhere at once. But what Flash didn't notice was Doomsday's eyes. They were tracking him, rapidly adjusting, sharpening with every passing impact. At first, the beast struggled to follow his movements. But now, he was adapting. Not just to Flash's speed, but to his rhythm, his patterns, guessing where he would be before he got there. Boom. Doomsday suddenly slammed his fist into the ground, sending a shockwave rippling out. The force caught Flash mid-run, throwing off his balance for a split second. And that was enough. Crack. Doomsday's fist crashed into Flash's side, lifting him clean off the ground. Before Flash could recover, Doomsday's other fist came slamming into him. Flash slammed into the ground, bouncing once before rolling to a stop. His breaths came in ragged gasps, sounding more like a wounded animal than the fastest man alive. He clutched his side, struggling to move. High above, Doomsday leapt into the air, aiming to crush him beneath his massive weight. FWOOOM. A brilliant green beam struck Doomsday midair, blasting him backward before he could land the killing blow. "Hal, stand down." Batman's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and commanding. "Like hell I will," Hal growled, floating down from orbit, his ring pulsing with power. "I'm a Green Lantern. We eat monsters like this for breakfast." With a roar of willpower, Hal's ring summoned thousands of rapid-fire constructs, missiles, cannons, and energy bolts, hovering in the air like a green storm. The sky lit up as every construct launched at once, streaking toward Doomsday in a blinding wave of emerald fury. Doomsday raised his arms, shielding his face as the barrage of green constructs rained down on him. The relentless assault blinded him, just as Hal moved in from above. With a flash of light and willpower, Hal conjured a jackhammer the size of a building and slammed it down on Doomsday's skull. Bang! 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 Each impact drove the monster deeper into the ground, his face buried in concrete as the hammer roared to life like thunder. Hal didn't let up for several seconds, pouring everything into the assault. Only when the crater had deepened and the dust began to settle did he stop. A massive green hand formed around Doomsday's body, lifting him off the ground. "I want to see the face of the bastard who hurt my friend," Hal muttered, drawing Doomsday closer. That was a mistake. With a sudden roar, Doomsday shattered the construct in a single motion and drove a devastating punch into Hal's face. Luckily for Hal, the lantern ring's shield held up, but just barely. The force of the blow still sent him rocketing through several buildings, shattering concrete and glass as he crashed through. Doomsday charged after him with terrifying speed, each step shaking the ground. Hal barely managed to form a glowing barrier around himself, but the moment Doomsday's fist slammed into it, cracks spider web through the construct with a deafening snap. Before the barrier could give, a flash of green light struck Doomsday from behind. Jon Stewart had arrived. "Back off," Jon growled, drawing the monster's attention and giving Hal precious seconds to breathe. Then came the reinforcements. Superman, Wonder Woman, Shazam, Martian Manhunter, the heavy hitters, all descended at once. Others followed close behind, surrounding Doomsday on all sides. The monster stopped, turning slowly as he scanned the heroes now encircling him. And then, with a guttural roar that shook the air, Doomsday launched himself straight at Superman. Chapter 62 Death of Superman. The battle was epic. The world watched in awe and horror as the Justice League clashed with a monster straight out of nightmares. Cameras from orbit and on the ground captured every second as the League worked together, dogpiling the beast in a coordinated assault. For a moment, it looked like they had the upper hand. Blows landed, energy beams struck home, and the monster staggered under the combined might of Earth's greatest heroes. But then, Doomsday adapted. He moved faster, hit harder, and then, one by one, he started taking them out. First, he snatched Superman by the cape and swung him like a weapon, slamming him into Jon's face, shattering the Green Lantern's nose and sending him flying like a rag doll. Before Superman could recover, Hal Jordan was next. Doomsday swung again, Superman's body crashing into Hal's stomach with brutal force. Hal's ring glowed brightly for a second, then flickered as he dropped to the ground, vomiting everything he had. And it didn't stop there. Shazam flew in with a punch, aiming straight for Doomsday's head, but at the last second, Doomsday twisted, yanking Superman into the line of fire, and pushed Superman forward at full force. The punch landed squarely on Superman's face. The collision sent out a deafening shockwave, shattering every window in a 5-block radius as the fight spilled into the heart of the city. Cars flipped, alarms wailed, and glass rained down like deadly confetti. Superman's face was a mess, bloodied, nose shattered, eyes dazed, nearly unconscious from the brutal blow. Shazam stumbled back, gripping his hand in pain, his fist broken from striking the Man of Steel. Superman had just become the perfect human shield. Suddenly, a golden lasso snapped around Doomsday's neck, tight, unyielding. With a powerful heave, Wonder Woman yanked him off his feet, spinning him in a wide arc through the air like a rag doll. Superman was released, his cape tearing free from Doomsday's grip as he tumbled to the side. "Hurry!" Wonder Woman shouted over the roar of wind and chaos, her voice sharp and commanding, aimed at Martian Manhunter. This wasn't a normal fight. Doomsday was stronger than anyone expected, stronger than Superman. Yes, Ashbourne had shown them the images of Superman's deaths across the multiverse, but they were sure teamwork could have helped them. After all, those images only had Superman facing Doomsday alone. How could they lose with the full might of the Justice League? Shazam soared into the sky, joining Martian Manhunter as the two of them rocketed downward, fists drawn back and glowing with raw power. At that same moment, Wonder Woman released her grip, launching Doomsday upward with all her strength. A perfect collision course. Boom! The impact shook the earth. The collision of fists and monster unleashed a shockwave so intense it shattered windows, toppled buildings, and sent nearby helicopters spiraling out of control. Doomsday was launched downward like a meteor, slamming into the ground with such force that a massive crater formed. An explosion of dirt and debris rising like a mushroom cloud. Everyone took the moment to catch their breath, certain that Doomsday had to be dead after a hit like that, right? But to their horror, from within the rising dust cloud, two beams of heat vision tore forward, blasting into Martian Manhunter's chest and sending him flying back, crying out in pain and fear. The searing heat was one thing, but it reminded him too much of fire. The others were stunned, caught completely off guard by the sudden counterattack. Then, Doomsday emerged. Only now he was bigger, stronger. The spikes across his body had grown, sharper and more dangerous than before. "Come at me, monster!" Wonder Woman roared, unsheathing her sword. With her shield in hand, She launched forward at high speed. Doomsday let out a beastly roar and swung a massive fist toward her, but she was flexible, more skilled. She twisted mid-charge, using his own arm as leverage, planting a foot against it to launch herself over his head. She landed smoothly behind him and immediately struck, kicking his leg to knock him off balance. Doomsday, however, caught himself with both hands and countered fast. His leg whipped around like a hammer, aiming straight for her. Wonder Woman raised her shield just in time. The impact rattled her bones and sent her skidding backward, but she held firm. With a quick flip, she landed on her feet, eyes locked on the monster as she dashed back in. Doomsday charged to meet her. Wonder Woman showcased her skill, striking with precision and grace. Though her attacks couldn't harm Doomsday, she was fast, landing hits, dodging blows, and even managing to knock the monster to the ground a few times. But it was all for nothing in the end. One solid hit sent her flying, crashing into the pavement, struggling to breathe, yet she still rose. Bruised, bloodied, and barely standing, she kept fighting, holding Doomsday off just long enough for the others to recover and rejoin her. But even together, they couldn't stop him. One by one, they were all taken down, left broken and gasping for air. Only Superman remained. Having recovered from his injuries, he arrived in a blur of speed and fury. His eyes glowed red before unleashing a searing beam of heat, slamming into Doomsday's side and sending the beast flying, just in time to save Shazam, who was seconds away from death. "Just watch. Superman's going to beat this guy." That was the sentiment echoed across the world, spoken by millions glued to their screens. Even after being knocked out of the fight earlier, they still believed in him. No matter how hopeless things seemed, they had faith. Because he was Superman, and Superman doesn't lose. So they watched him unleash his full power for the first time in this battle. With that strength, he went toe-to-toe with Doomsday. The sheer force of their blows tore the city apart like it was paper. Buildings crumbled, shockwaves rippled, and the battlefield turned into a war zone. Superman fought with everything he had, but he was still Superman. Even as he matched Doomsday's blows, he turned his attention to the people, diverting from the fight to save innocents caught in the chaos. And that heroism gave Doomsday the opening he needed. A devastating blow landed. Then another. Superman staggered, and the world held its breath. Bit by bit, Superman was losing. Every blow he landed was returned with greater force. Every breath he took grew heavier. And just when it looked like Doomsday was about to finish him off, someone no one expected stepped in. Lex Luthor. Clad in armor similar to the suits worn by the men who attacked the White House, only far more advanced, he descended onto the battlefield. For a brief moment, it looked like he might actually help turn the tide, but it didn't last. Doomsday tore through the armor like paper, and in an instant, Lex was on the verge of death. Superman stepped in. He barely managed to save him, his own body nearly giving out in the process. Blood ran down his face, staining the iconic S on his chest. He could barely stand. His lungs burned with every breath. But when he looked up, he saw her, Lois. Tears in her eyes, camera in her hand. She was filming. For the world. For his parents. Superman forced a smile, one that told the world he wasn't finished yet. That even now, at the edge of death, he would stand. Because he was Superman, there was hope and light in this cruel world. Turning back to Doomsday, Superman surged forward, meeting the beast head-on once more. Doomsday, though clearly worn down, still moved with terrifying strength. The two collided again, fists slamming into each other, each blow creating massive shockwaves that sent Lois and the cameraman stumbling back. Lois stared in horror as Superman began to falter, his strength waning under the onslaught. Blow after blow landed on him, brutal and unrelenting. Blood flew with each strike. "No," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. Desperate, she grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it with all her strength. It struck Doomsday in the shoulder. The monster paused, slowly turning his head toward her. His red eyes locked on Lois, narrowing in rage. But before he could move, he stopped, his gaze drawn upward. From above, the Batwing shot towards them. Batman flew his Batjet straight into Doomsday, who easily caught it with a grunt. But Batman had expected that. He had already jumped out midair, a kryptonite-tipped spear clenched between his teeth. Doomsday hurled the Badjet at Batman like a missile, but Batman opened his cape and expertly glided through the air, twisting to avoid the incoming wreckage. As he descended, he yanked the spear from his mouth and, with practiced precision, hurled it at Doomsday. But the monster reacted faster than expected. Twisting his body, Doomsday narrowly avoided the spear, which stabbed into the ground behind him. Superman! Batman roared. Hearing his name, Superman, bloody, beaten, barely conscious, gritted his teeth and forced himself to his feet. His body screamed in pain, but he ignored it. With one final surge of strength, he grabbed the kryptonite spear lodged in the ground. With a mighty leap, Superman launched himself toward Doomsday, the green-tipped weapon clutched tightly in his hands. Doomsday turned just in time to see him coming. For a single moment, the world seemed to freeze, then the spear drove deep into Doomsday's chest. At the same time, one of Doomsday's jagged bone spikes tore through Superman's torso. Doomsday staggered, clutching at the glowing spear embedded in his chest. With a guttural snarl, he flung Superman's limp body aside. But the motion cost him. His legs gave out, and the beast collapsed, unmoving. Batman stood still, fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tight behind the cowl. He had been too late. If he hadn't wasted time, if he had stopped pretending to be Bruce Wayne for just one day, maybe this could have ended differently. No, Lois cried, rushing to Superman's side. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as they hovered over his bloodied chest. His breaths were shallow, faint. The glow in his eyes, the light the world looked up to, was dimming. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled freely, but she wasn't alone. Across the globe, the world held its breath. Screens lit up city squares, homes, and phones. People watched, stunned, broken. Some wept openly, others fell silent. Superman, their symbol of hope, was dying. Is he dead? Superman asked weakly, his voice barely a whisper. His gaze searched Lois's eyes, desperate for an answer. Lois choked back a sob and nodded, her tears falling freely. Yes, he's gone, she whispered. A faint, relieved smile tugged at the corner of Superman's lips. Good, he breathed. With that, his eyes slowly closed, and his body went still in Lois's trembling arms. Chapter 63 inches. What's missing to make this scene perfect is the cape, a voice cut through the somber air. Everyone turned to see Ashbourne calmly walking over, holding Superman's cape in his hands. Where were you? Batman asked through gritted teeth. Most of the League was down, beaten, and barely clinging to consciousness or life. I was in Florida. I have this friend who was teaching me how to surf, Ashbourne said as he calmly walked over to Superman's side. I got here as fast as I could once I heard what was happening, but I was too late. He had disabled the nearby cameras. He couldn't let the world see that he was failing as the new leader of the Justice League. I'm guessing this happened because I was pulled out of the picture. It's like Superman was fated to die, and I was just conveniently out of reach to make sure it happened, Ashbourne muttered while checking Superman's vitals. He was truly dead. He ignored Lois's tear-filled stare, silently questioning his words, desperate for answers he wasn't going to give. Behind you, Batman shouted, eyes widening as Doomsday stood up. The spear had been pulled from his chest. Superman had missed the heart. Now, Doomsday loomed, glaring down at Ashbourne. But Ashbourne didn't even turn his head. Should I kill it? Ashbourne asked calmly, still focused on Superman, or let it live as a training puppet for the League? Batman remained tense for a second longer, until he noticed Ashbourne's complete lack of concern. That ease, it was enough to put Batman at ease somewhat. Forget it. I have a feeling he's connected to the darkness somehow, Ashbourne said as Doomsday's fist shot toward his back. A portal opened just behind Ashbourne. The fist entered it, and instantly, another portal opened beside Doomsday's face. His own punch came flying out, the sharp spike on his knuckle stabbing straight into his head, killing him. Once I deal with this body, I'll return to check on the League. Make sure those with serious injuries stay alive until then, Ashbourne said, lifting Doomsday effortlessly onto his shoulder. Why can't you just do it now? Batman asked, frustration in his voice. He wanted answers. Because I don't know how this universe's Doomsday works, Ashbourne replied. Will the body come back to life? Or is there some planet out there where he'll just reform and adapt to whatever killed him? I need to figure that out to make sure Doomsday 2.0 doesn't come knocking. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. Which means I need to scan this entire universe. Hard, complex stuff. Now that I think about it, maybe I shouldn't have killed him before getting that information. With that, he burst into the sky and vanished. He doesn't want the public to know he uses dark power, Batman thought, eyes narrowing. But after a moment, he looked at Lois, then turned and ran to check on the rest of the League. Superman was gone, and Batman knew the last thing he'd want was for anyone to waste time mourning while others were still at death's door. Looks like you won't respawn. What a shame. I would have loved to fuse an army of Doomsdays together. Standing on the moon, Ashbourne gazed out at the universe, slightly disappointed by his discovery. No, this is better, he thought, a smirk forming. I can fuse the Hulk, Doomsday, and who else? His eyes lit up with excitement. This fusion is going to need a red lantern ring to top it off. Arise, Ashbourne commanded, and with a flash of darkness, Doomsday's body stirred, now kneeling before him as a shadow soldier. With Superman dead, things should start moving, Ashbourne thought. Hopefully, the next wave of events pushes Lex Luthor to join the League. If not, I wouldn't mind making Bright Mind even smarter. With that, he teleported back to Earth and began healing the Justice League, one member at a time. Did Ashbourne bring back those who died? No, because even though Ashbourne was playing the role of the Justice League leader, he was by no means a hero. He wasn't doing any of this out of the kindness of his heart. He was helping them purely for his own safety. As cruel as it might seem, letting those lives stay lost would serve the multiverse better. Their deaths would be a wake-up call, a painful reminder that failure has real consequences. But if Ashbourne simply brought everyone back, the League might start to believe they had a safety net, that he would always be there to undo their mistakes. This also applied to Superman, but in his case, Ashbourne expected him to die, just not for long. Superman's death was part of what Ashbourne had foreseen, but his return wasn't guaranteed. With the light losing to the darkness, there was a real possibility that, this time, the dead might not come back. That meant Ashbourne would have to personally make sure Superman's recovery went smoothly. In the days that followed, the world felt dimmer. Superman's funeral was held, and people from every corner came forward with stories of how Superman had saved their lives, helped fix their cars, found their lost pets, or even broken into their homes to rescue them from abusive situations. The man had done it all, and now he was gone, leaving the world to realize just how much Superman had given them. When things got hard, the world called out to Superman, and he always answered. No matter the threat, no matter the odds, Superman would show up and put his body on the line to shield them. Now, he was gone. And in his absence, the world felt smaller, and weaker. One day later inside the Hall of Justice, Ashbourne sat in a chair, silently observing the members of the Justice League who had taken part in the battle against Doomsday. Go ahead, let it out, Ashbourne said calmly. Hal, who had been holding in his rage, stood up and glared at Ashbourne. But before he could speak, Ashbourne raised a hand to stop him. Not you, Ashbourne said. I don't want to hear you blame me when. He paused, and a screen appeared in front of everyone. It began replaying the conversation they had all shared with him about Doomsday. Lastly, this, Ashbourne said as he played another video, this one showing Hal ignoring Batman's warning. I'm part of the Green Lantern Corps. We eat monsters like this for breakfast. The recording of Green Lantern echoed through the room. I told you all how to deal with Doomsday. I showed you how other versions of Superman across the multiverse handled him. With all that said, I step away for a few minutes, not even an hour, and you all forget everything I told you, Ashbourne said lightly. It was hard to tell whether he was angry, disappointed, or if he didn't care. Then we have the roles I gave you all to play, Ashbourne said, his gaze sweeping over the room. Other than Wonder Woman, Shazam, and Superman, the rest of you were tasked with ensuring the safety of civilians. So tell me, why couldn't you stick to the plan? Why did you engage Doomsday and make him stronger? Why didn't you focus on evacuating those citizens and leave the fight to the ones I assigned? His words struck hard, and the room was filled with silence. No one had an answer. They all gritted their teeth, frustration and regret written across their faces. But I don't like dwelling on the past, Ashbourne continued. Humanity didn't get to where it is today by kicking itself over past mistakes. With a snap of his fingers, a pulse of shadow rippled outward, and in the next moment, every member of the League jumped in shock, eyes fixed on the shadows behind them. Your shadows are now a gateway to the dimension I told you about, Ashbourne said, rising from his seat. In there, 1,000,000,000,000 years can pass in just a second outside. Use that time to train. Just remember, injuries sustained outside the training dimension can't be healed inside it. And injuries gained inside can't be healed while you're still in there either. Chapter 64. He began to walk away, then paused and turned slightly. Flash, while you're in there, focus on mastering the speed force. Learn to tap into it more deeply, because from what I've seen, there are flashes across the multiverse who can move at the speed of light without issue. One of them even outran teleportation in a race. Flash's eyes widened, stunned at the idea. Moving faster than teleportation, that was something even he couldn't imagine. Wonder Woman, you should focus on pushing yourself to your limit, Ashbourne said. You're the most balanced member of the Justice League. Strong, but not the strongest. Fast, but not the fastest. What sets you apart is your combat experience and skill, and untapped power. Use this time to tap into your divine power. Wonder Woman paused, taking in his words. She was the daughter of Zeus. Surely there was more strength within her, waiting to be awakened. She gave a firm nod, fully understanding what Ashbourne meant. Cyborg, work on upgrading your body. You're no longer bound by human limits, Ashbourne said firmly. Martian, conquer your fear of fire. I know it's deep-rooted, but there are Martians across the multiverse who've overcome it. He turned to the lanterns. John, Hal, stop creating basic human weapons in the middle of battle. You have the will to shape a Superman, with all of his powers and capabilities so long as your willpower is strong enough, so why limit yourselves to hammers and guns? Ashbourne looked over the room, his gaze sharp. All of you should start training. After everything with Doomsday, I've realized something. I need to start traveling the multiverse. The longer I stay here, the more universes vanish. With that, he tossed a flip phone toward Batman. It looked ordinary, simple, outdated even, but Ashbourne's tone said otherwise. Use that to call me. I might also come to get one of you guys from time to fight my battles. I don't want the darkness to know where I'm at. So get training, as your multiversal selves might be stronger than you all combined. With those words, Ashbourne teleported away. Can't you just leave? Why do I have to come? Ember asked in annoyance. Are you dumb? Do I look like I'm in any condition to fight someone equipped with my armor? Ashbourne asked with a snort. Given how powerful his armor was, even a normal person wearing it would be enough to defeat him. Then again, if he got close enough, Ashbourne believed he could simply command it to return to him, but he didn't want to risk it. Ashbourne, you and your damn disrespect, Ember said through gritted teeth that clenched even harder when Ashbourne blatantly ignored her. He tapped away on his phone, searching for a universe before opening a portal. You said something, Ashbourne asked mockingly, further enraging Ember. But before she could respond, he stepped through the portal, leaving her no choice but to follow, though not before leaving a piece of herself behind. With Ashbourne gone, he wouldn't be able to sense what she was about to do. That fragment of Ember teleported away, reforming into her full self as it appeared before a door. She knocked once. Tyler opened it after some time and instantly froze, her eyes widening at the sight of Ember standing there with a cold, emotionless gaze. Without waiting for Tyler to say anything, Ember stepped inside. Tyler stood frozen for a moment before slipping the gun she had been hiding behind her back into her coat, knowing full well it would have been useless. You can drop the act, Ember said coldly. Why are you getting close to Ashbourne? Tyler was silent for a moment, then slowly removed her wig, revealing the face of someone Batman knew all too well, Talia al Ghul. When Ashbourne met with my father to gain his support in becoming the leader of the Justice League, my father noticed a few cracks in him, Talia said calmly. As powerful as Ashbourne is, he has a weakness, he's vulnerable around women. So, my father asked me to get close to him, to control him. It was true. For all his overwhelming strength, Ashbourne did have a lustful side, though he never acted on it. Mostly because he believed himself to be ugly. That belief only grew deeper with every rejection, making him think his charm. Stat must have been helping in some other way, just not romantically. Of course, Ashbourne had the means to see through Talia's lies and act, but that would mean he was looking into her mind or something. And as Ashbourne believed, treat people the way you want to be treated, unless they are a zombie or your employees, which you don't have to pay. Yet when he asked you out, you rejected him. Ember asked, raising an eyebrow. Talia had no answer. She couldn't explain it. She had Ashbourne in the palm of her hand, yet she rejected him. Lied to her father, even, claiming she had asked Ashbourne out and that he had rejected her. She had crafted an entirely new persona, an alternate version of herself from another universe, one where she and Ashbourne had a shared history. And for that, she was grateful Ashbourne wasn't the type to pry into someone's mind to verify their story. He considered that rude. Ashbourne is an idiot, but he's my idiot, Ember said coldly. You'll tell him the truth the next time you see him. With those words, Ember vanished, leaving Talia standing in silence. And in that silence, she realized something unsettling. She was more afraid of telling Ashbourne the truth than she was of facing Ember. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. So, this is a universe where Superman is evil? Ashbourne asked, walking through the streets of a new world. His eyes stayed locked on the screen in front of him, scrolling through it as he searched for more universes worth visiting. Yes, he muttered with a bored yawn. He killed his pregnant wife, or girlfriend, thinking she was Doomsday. He snapped after that. He started killing criminals. It didn't take long before he became a full-blown tyrant who lost his way. Can't you just broadcast a message across the multiverse and have the Justice League of every universe call for your help when needed? Ember asked. You could even create a place where time doesn't move, or something like the TVA, letting you answer all the calls. Ashbourne paused mid-step, realizing he hadn't thought of that. You're so stupid sometimes, Ember said, clearly speechless. How does not thinking of something make me stupid? Ashbourne muttered. I can't think of everything. But you're right. I should study how others handle it and learn from that. Chapter 65 Inches First. Let's break this whole mindset of you being ugly, Ember said. It's annoying sometimes, and sometimes it's cute. Go ask someone out, anyone. She looked around at the people walking down the street. Ashbourne narrowed his eyes at her but said nothing, choosing to ignore her. He had no interest in being rejected again. If they reject you, I don't know, I'll give you my bra, Ember added with a look of disdain. Perverts like you are into that kind of stuff. Ashbourne's face darkened immediately. First, I'm not a pervert. Secondly, you're too flat to even think about using the word bra. When someone imagines a flat surface, you're the first thing that comes to mind. You're so perfectly flat that if someone stood on you and stepped off, they'd go crazy thinking the whole world was tilted. Ashbourne snapped, his voice sharp with frustration. Ember's body trembled with rage. Her teeth cracked from how tightly she was clenching her jaw. Ashbourne was ready to keep going, but he wisely stopped, realizing Ember just might kill him if he pushed her any further. To quickly change the subject, he turned and approached a random, nice-looking girl. She blinked at him in stunned confusion as Ashbourne awkwardly rubbed the back of his head, clearly avoiding eye contact. This is a bit weird and all, but I couldn't help but notice you. I was wondering if we could, by chance, get to know each other. Ashbourne asked. The woman's mouth dropped open in shock, her face slowly turning red. She took a step back, stammered, then abruptly turned, and ran away, leaving Ashbourne standing there with a lost look on his face. No, I can't. I know my worth. I'm not good enough. Ember's face darkened as she read the woman's thoughts. It wasn't rejection out of disgust, it was self-doubt. The woman didn't think she was good enough, and that truth made her flee in tears. Try someone else. She was crazy, Ember said. Ashbourne shot her a glare, clearly not in the mood to be humiliated again. Still, he stepped forward, choosing to believe Ember wasn't setting him up. Hey, I saw you across the street, and I knew I'd curse myself if I didn't at least try to get to know you, Ashbourne said with a friendly smile. Sorry, I can't, she said, her face bright red. Ashbourne couldn't tell if it was from embarrassment or rage. He opened his mouth to say something, but she slapped him across the face before he could. I said I can't, she screamed, tears streaming down her cheeks before she turned and ran off. Ashbourne stood there, eye twitching, barely resisting the urge to slap her back. I'm married. I can't. Ember read the woman's thoughts, her eye twitching in frustration. Why couldn't she just tell Ashbourne she was married? Her mind was too chaotic. Those words never made it out. All she managed to say was that she couldn't. She was married. One more, Ember said to Ashbourne, who now looked like he was ready to kill her. He gritted his teeth but still forced himself to approach another woman, one who hadn't witnessed the earlier outburst. Hey, I couldn't help but notice you. I don't have a pickup line, but I saw you reading a book, and I thought that was beautiful, Ashbourne said to a young woman sitting in the park. She looked up, stunned, her eyes wide as she stared at him. For a moment, she opened and closed her mouth as if searching for words. Then, suddenly, she burst into tears and ran off, leaving Ashbourne to sigh and sit down on the nearest bench. Why wasn't I born as a girl? The young woman thought as she fled, leaving Ember speechless after reading her mind. The former male had desperately wanted to jump into Ashbourne's arms, but the fear of lying to him and facing his reaction was too much to bear. So she ran, too afraid to speak her truth. Is someone out there making sure he can't have a girlfriend or something? Ember was speechless. A part of her even considered hiring someone to sleep with Ashbourne just to see how it would turn out, but deep down, she knew it would probably end the same way. He had to be cursed. And then it hit her. When she rejected Ashbourne, it was just like everyone else had. Leave me alone, Ashbourne said coldly. He had made peace with being ugly, yet he'd let himself believe Ember twice. That meant a part of him still held hope that he might actually look good. But what kind of person gets rejected the way he had today? Not even people considered unattractive were treated like that. He didn't even want to look at Ember right now. The fact that she dared to sit next to him after doing something so cruel and heartless only made him angrier. But at the moment, he was too swallowed by grief to show that rage. Idiot. Read the minds of the ones who rejected you. Even if you don't want to dig into their thoughts, at least read their emotions, Ember said sharply. Ashbourne looked at her in confusion, but he followed her advice anyway. The moment he tapped into their thoughts and emotions, his eyes widened in disbelief. Siri, do a scan of my body. Why am I being rejected? Ashbourne asked, and his phone appeared in front of him. The reason for rejection is due to your extremely low love luck, Siri replied. Those you approach become unusually self-aware, overly self-conscious, and emotionally unstable. In extreme cases, the universe itself may twist fate to prevent the relationship from happening. Ashbourne and Ember stood there in stunned silence, speechless. Fine. Just one more reason for me to quickly regain my former strength, Ashbourne said calmly, before pausing as he sensed reality being torn apart. His attention instantly locked onto the source of the disturbance, Trigon, locked in battle with a fifth-dimensional imp. Chapter 66 Bonus Chapter Ashbourne and Ember teleported outside the House of Mystery, where they were met with the chaotic sight of a fractured Justice League. The Batman-led team included Batman himself, Batwoman, Catwoman, John Constantine, the Huntress, Renee Montoya, Harley Quinn, Dr. Fate, and what appeared to be the ghost of Dick Grayson. Meanwhile, the Superman-led team consisted of Superman, a Yellow Lantern Hal, Shazam, Sinestro, and Wonder Woman. There may have been more, but Ashbourne didn't really care. His attention was focused on the two beings locked in battle, Trigon and Mxyzptlk. Hey, Wonder Woman, want to step out and do some real fighting? Ashbourne called out. Inside the training dimension, Wonder Woman was locked in battle against shadow versions of every member of the Justice League. Of course, within this dimension, where Ashbourne held complete control, almost anything was possible. Since he granted them full freedom to train, they were able to push themselves to the limit and grow stronger at a rapid pace. Another fun fact about the training dimension, it allowed one to train at 100% efficiency. The mind couldn't comprehend the passage of time, and the body wouldn't age while inside. The only thing that could slow down their training was injury. This meant someone could train for 1 trillion years without ever feeling the weight of that time, only the rapid growth in strength. It made this dimension the ideal place for anyone serious about getting stronger. Yes, Wonder Woman answered instantly, stopping her training in surprise at being called into action so soon. Ashbourne nodded before floating up into the sky. Everyone, If I may have your attention, please, Ashbourne called out, his voice laced with a unique power that compelled silence. All fighting came to a halt. Even Superman and Batman, who had been locked in battle, paused. Remarkably, Batman was matching Superman blow for blow, thanks to a drug that temporarily gave him the strength to rival the Man of Steel. "Thank you. Give me 1 second, Ashbourne said, clearly annoyed as he looked toward Trigon and Mr. MXY, who were still locked in battle. He wanted to kill them both on the spot, but the risk of drawing the darkness was too great. Trigon, unlike Darkseid, who embodied a more lawful evil, was simply evil, chaotic, and unpredictable, with a strong connection to the darkness itself. Without warning, Ashbourne teleported directly between them just as they were about to clash. With a calm motion, he activated full counter, redirecting their own attacks back at them. "Counter storage," Ashbourne said, calmly storing the 2 powerful attacks he'd just reflected. Since he couldn't use his full power freely, he had begun developing techniques to fill in the gaps. Counter copy. Ashbourne spread his hands wide, and the attacks he had just countered were duplicated, manifesting in reality as hundreds of identical energy blasts that now hovered around Trigon and Mxyzptlk. Counter paste. With those final words, the copied attacks became real, and all of them rained down in unison. Trigon and Mxyzptlk scrambled to shield themselves, but the sheer volume of the assault quickly overwhelmed them. Infinite barrier. I really should find a way to use these techniques without having to say them out loud. Then again, they're kind of like magic, so the words help guide the process, Ashbourne muttered, rubbing the back of his head. He watched as the barrier expanded, stretching space itself to absorb the shockwaves from the earlier assault, preventing the universe from being torn apart. Ahem. Now, where was I? Right. Turning his attention back to the assembled heroes and villains, Ashbourne snapped his fingers. Instantly, a wave of understanding washed over them, each one enlightened with the precise knowledge Ashbourne intended to share. "So, as you've probably gathered from the knowledge I just gave you, I'm here to clean up your universe. Any questions?" Ashbourne asked with a light smile. "How do you plan to clean up, exactly?" Batman asked with a frown, his gaze shifting from the now lifeless bodies of Trigon and Mxyzptlk back to Ashbourne, a clear unease in his eyes. "I plan to kill everyone who sided with Superman. After that, I'll finish cleaning out the rest of this universe. There aren't that many villains left anyway. From there, I'll have you and the remaining League members form a multiversal Justice League. It'll be a part-time role since I plan to revive dead versions of the League from collapsed universes to take up the mantle full-time." Ashbourne spoke lazily, as if it were just another task on his list. "That's not the way," Batman said through gritted teeth, his voice firm with refusal. Killing. He couldn't support that. Anything else, maybe, but not that. "Sadly, I don't care. Any last words for Wonder Woman, Superman, and the rest?" Ashbourne asked with a smile. The Superman-led team floated into the sky. "Are you all just going to accept his words at face value?" Superman asked, his voice filled with disbelief and fury. He looked down at Batman and the others, frustrated by how easily they seemed to accept Ashbourne's judgment. But they couldn't be entirely blamed. Out of everyone, Batman wanted to step forward and stop Ashbourne. He truly did, but his own team held him back. They didn't say a word, but their eyes said enough. They wanted Superman's team gone. Even if Ashbourne was lying, what could they really do about it? He was too powerful. Charging in headfirst would only get them all killed. "You know," Ashbourne began casually, "the easiest one to defeat among you is Superman. All I'd have to do is bring Lois back to life and let her see what you've become." He paused, his tone turning mockingly. "That's how you were supposed to be defeated. After another universe Lois saw you, you woke realized you were wrong. I don't know if the darkness twisted you, and made you more evil, but let's find out." With a snap of his fingers, a graveyard miles away exploded, bones scattering as a single skeleton came flying toward them. Superman's face instantly turned red with rage at the sight of his wife's remains being toyed with like that. Ashbourne, on the other hand, ignored him and tried to bring Lois back to life, only to facepalm as he remembered he was still too weak to meddle with life and death directly. That's even more so with how much MP he just used, killing those 2 brings who were shattering reality without meaning to. With an annoyed glance, he turned to Ember. She rolled her eyes, raised her hand, and snapped her fingers. Flames erupted around Lois's skeleton, engulfing it completely. Superman tensed, ready to charge, but froze when the fire faded away. Standing in its place was a very much alive and pregnant Lois. "Lois," Superman whispered, reaching out, longing to pull her into his arms. But he stopped cold as Ashbourne placed a hand gently on her head. "Now, what would happen if she were given full knowledge of everything you've done since her death?" Ashbourne said, his voice calm, almost amused. "Would that be enough to wake you up, or would you still stand tall in your convictions?" Superman's heart sank in horror. He wanted to stop Ashbourne, but it was already too late. Lois's eyes shot open. A flood of memories and visions filled her mind, everything Superman had done since the day she died. Her body tensed, her face twisted in pain as she clutched her head, overwhelmed by the storm in her mind. Then, slowly, her gaze shifted to him, eyes brimming with tears. "Superman did what he had to do. We made a difference," Wonder Woman said, her eyes fixed on Superman with unwavering support. Superman clenched his eyes shut, silent tears slipping down his face as the weight of everything he had done pressed down on him. Now, he stood at a crossroads. Would he keep walking the path he'd carved in blood, or turn back, for her? I can't stop now, not after I've come this far," he roared, anguish and fury twisting his voice. In a blur, he shot toward Ashbourne, eyes blazing. He had to take Lois back, she would understand, she had to. Once the world was finally at peace, once everything was over, she'd see that everything he did was for the greater good. But to everyone's shock, Wonder Woman appeared, yet not the one they knew. She caught Superman's fist with a single hand, her presence commanding immediate attention. This Wonder Woman wasn't from their universe. No, her aura was brighter, stronger, more heroic than the one they had followed. "Kill them all. I don't want to deal with ex-heroes breaking out of prison later," Ashbourne said coldly. Wonder Woman hesitated, her eyes locking with Superman's. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Superman and back in her universe were friends, but Ashbourne's command weighed heavier. For him she steeled her heart. In one swift motion, she twisted Superman's arm, snapping it with a sickening crack. Superman screamed in pain, dropping to one knee. Seeing how much stronger she was, Wonder Woman wasted no time and went in for the kill. Hal and the remaining members of Superman's team launched themselves toward her to stop the attack, but Ashbourne simply stepped aside, allowing her to carry out the execution. "I expected her to hesitate. Is my charm really that powerful?" Ashbourne thought, stunned, as Wonder Woman snapped Superman's neck with brutal efficiency. She used his body to block Hal's blast before rocketing forward and grabbing her counterpart. She was handling all of them with ease, a sight that left Ashbourne quietly proud, until his eyes fell on Superman's corpse. It was turning black, a dark aura rising off his body like smoke. "Fuck," Ashbourne muttered, drawing everyone's attention to what was happening. Chapter 67 The battle between Wonder Woman and the others came to a sudden halt as everyone's attention shifted to Superman. His once iconic blue and red outfit had turned jet black. His skin, too, darkened with an eerie shadowy tone. Then, before their eyes, the neck Wonder Woman had snapped, twisted unnaturally, and snapped back into place with a sickening crack. Superman stood up, silent, alive, and radiating a sinister energy. "Ashbourne, what are you doing?" Wonder Woman asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. But even as she spoke, she sensed it, this wasn't Ashbourne's doing. Whatever had taken hold of Superman felt far too dark. Far too evil. "This isn't my doing," Ashbourne said with a sigh. "But this is clear proof he was evil. The darkness used whatever darkness was already inside him to bring him back." Lois covered her mouth, tears falling from her eyes. Watching the man she loved fall so far, it was almost too much to bear. "I'm not evil, everything I did was for the greater good," Superman roared, his voice shaking with rage. His eyes blazed red before he unleashed a beam of heat vision, hotter than the sun, blasting straight toward Ashbourne. Everything in the path of the heat vision was erased. Atoms burned away so completely that they released a massive surge of energy, resulting in a devastating explosion in midair. The blast was colossal, vaporizing everything nearby for miles. But Superman didn't stop. His eyes scanned the distance, where he spotted Ashbourne, who had teleported everyone far away to safety, far enough that they could see the scale of the destruction Superman had just unleashed. "So, I think you guys should stop being evil and help out," Ashbourne said to Hal and the others, who were still struggling to process what was happening. "That's not Superman. You did something to him," Injustice Wonder Woman said, refusing to believe what had become of the man she once followed. "Yes, you're right. I, who just weakened myself by defeating two beings capable of destroying this universe, obviously decided it was a good idea to bring Superman back to life, stronger than ever," Ashbourne said with a dramatic roll of his eyes. "And to really sell the act, I even had him attack me, just so I could burn through the little energy I have left. Brilliant, isn't it? And they say Batman is the world's greatest detective." Injustice Wonder Woman clenched her fists in rage. "Then why didn't Doomsday go through something like that?" Prime Wonder Woman asked, recalling how nothing similar happened after Ashbourne killed Doomsday. "Good question. I'm guessing it's because Doomsday was already fated to return," Ashbourne said with a shrug. "Anyway, I really shouldn't be fighting right now. I'd rather not draw unnecessary attention to myself." "This isn't the time to talk, he's coming," Hal shouted, but it was already too late. At the speed of light, Superman appeared right in front of Ashbourne, his fist flying toward him with lethal intent. But at the last second, Superman was forced to halt. Ashbourne had suddenly pulled Lois's face in front of the incoming punch. "What are you doing?" Several voices cried out in horror, stunned by the seemingly heartless act. Ashbourne, however, didn't respond. He didn't need to. The Lois standing in front of him was just an illusion. He had already teleported the real one far away to safety. "So, you still have some good left in you. That means there's a voice inside, telling you this isn't who you are," Ashbourne said, forming a mirror in front of Superman. The moment Superman saw his reflection, he floated back, visibly shaken by his appearance. "You see, you and I aren't too different. Growing up, my only friend was a swing I'd sit on while watching." Wait, wrong flashback. Ashbourne paused, realizing he still hadn't mastered the art of talk no jutsu. Ignoring the confused looks, he made a mental note to perfect it later. "Lois is back. You can be a father, but not like this. You're becoming a monster, and if you keep going, you'll lose any chance of ever holding your child with love. Is that what you want? For your child to grow up without a father figure? Are you going to take those father and child moments away because you're giving up here?" Ashbourne asked calmly. Superman clutched his head, letting out a guttural, demonic roar as he struggled with the raging conflict inside. "Go, talk to him while beating him up," Ashbourne said, seeing that Superman wasn't going to come back to his senses on his own. Though they hesitated, the others followed Wonder Woman's lead and charged forward to take on Superman, and they were almost overwhelmed. The only reason they were able to keep up in the fight was thanks to Dr. Fate and John Constantine. The two magic users worked together to suppress Superman's power, giving the others a fighting chance. With Superman restrained on the outside, it gave the version of him still buried within a chance to fight back, with a little help from Ashbourne. "I made so many mistakes. I became a tyrant," Superman said, curled up in a ball in some shadowy corner of his mind. All around him was pure darkness, darkness that parted as its sovereign approached. "That you were," Ashbourne said softly, "but now, you can be so much more. You lost your way, but you've found it again. Now, you can use your mistakes to grow and become an even better Superman. Even if you don't want to be Superman for the sake of the world, then do it for your child." Superman looked up at him, tears in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but Ashbourne cut him off gently. "Yes, the world may never see you the same way. Their outlook might never change. If that's enough to stop you from being a hero for them, then don't be a hero for them, be one for the people who love you. Just look outside. Everyone is still fighting for you. They've accepted their mistake." Ashbourne crouched down beside him. "Death is the coward's way out. And when was the last time Superman was afraid?" he asked with a small smile. Superman lowered his head for a long moment, then, slowly, he began to rise. "How are you standing?" The darkness within Superman roared, watching in disbelief as Superman's light grew stronger, pushing it back. "Don't say anything. It can't sense my presence," Ashbourne said, placing a hand on Superman's shoulder. "Like I said, I can't move against the darkness, not yet. With that, Ashbourne vanished. Moments later, Superman let out a thunderous roar, releasing the darkness from within. The corrupted energy burst out like a cloud of black gas, dissipating into the air. Ashbourne floated above, watching it unfold. Looks like I need to update my plans. Even if a villain can be killed, they shouldn't be, because they'll just come back stronger. He sighed, feeling the drain on his MP as his body still hadn't fully recovered. Ignoring the others who rushed to Superman's side as he collapsed, Ashbourne quietly flew over to the bodies of Trigon and Mr. Mxyzptlk. Arise, Ashbourne said calmly, drawing everyone's attention. Instantly, they went on high alert as a tornado of darkness swirled into existence, then vanished, revealing Trigon and Mr. Mxyzptlk kneeling before Ashbourne. Explain, Batman demanded, his voice sharp with unease. Simple, Ashbourne replied lazily. I told their shadows to rise. Don't worry, this isn't the same as what happened to Superman. My powers turned them into living shadows that are completely loyal to me. What happened to Superman was different. He became a darker, stronger version of himself because of the evil already inside his heart. My Lord Ashbourne, Trigon spoke, his voice low with reluctant concern. I am the god of evil. As much as it pains me to admit, I fear the darkness may use the very evil I embody to control me. Ashbourne frowned, not having considered that possibility. It's fine, I'll deal with that later. For now, return to my shadow, he said, dismissing the two. Trigon and Mxyzptlk silently dissolved into his shadow. Turning back to the remaining members of Superman's team, Ashbourne crossed his arms. Now, as for the rest of you, call me crazy, but I think everything that just happened is more than enough proof that you're all a bunch of bad guys. Hal, Shazam, and Wonder Woman gritted their teeth, their silence saying everything. Chapter 68 inches. I know I might sound like a dumbass, but maybe if the world starts seeing the Joker as a good guy, you're doing something wrong. Maybe if you're teaming up with someone named Sinestro, I don't know, maybe, just maybe, you're doing something wrong, Ashbourne said, his tone casual but biting. I know, I sound stupid, but hear me out. Their expressions tightened with irritation, but that irritation quickly faded as a glowing image appeared in the air beside Ashbourne. Their eyes widened, and then slowly darkened with shame and horror as the scene unfolded. Sinestro. Cold and merciless, killing Jon Stewart. And worse, manipulating Hal into killing a former ally. The sad part is, all of this happened while the balance between light and darkness was still intact. You were so stupid, Ashbourne said coldly. But I don't care to go over the list of your crimes. So, you ex-heroes have two options, death, or sacrifice yourselves to restore that balance. His gaze locked onto Sinestro, who was quietly edging backward, clearly preparing to flee. But he froze in place as Ashbourne's mocking smirk settled on him. I'm sorry, Hal whispered, collapsing to his knees as tears streamed down his face. I thought we were doing the right thing. Those quiet words were the final blow. The shoulders of the other former heroes slumped, the crushing weight of truth settling in as they finally accepted it. They had been the villains all along. Is that Ares? Ashbourne asked, narrowing his eyes at the figure clad in armor. At the mention of his name, the god of war, who had been standing quietly among the Superman team, took a cautious step back. You teamed up with the god of war, isn't that guy evil? But I want him as my shadow, Ashbourne said with a smirk. Ares' pupils shrank. Without hesitation, he turned to flee, but it was already too late. A humanoid shadow ant appeared behind him in an instant. Before Ares could react, the ant's tail pierced cleanly through his chest. As soon as Ares died, a surge of darkness rose from his body, but just as quickly, it vanished, leaving everyone confused. Looks like the darkness can't affect those killed by the darkness, Ember said lightly, causing Ashbourne's eyebrow to rise in interest. Without a word, Ashbourne gave Meruem a nod. In an instant, Sinestro was dead. Batman instinctively stepped forward, as if to intervene, but stopped himself. What could he have done? Meruem was simply too fast. Arise, Ashbourne said, ignoring Batman's glare as he calmly watched two new shadow soldiers emerge. With a wave of his hand, he stored them away into his shadow. He gave Meruem a nod of thanks, which the Ant King accepted with visible pride before disappearing back into the shadows. Why would you kill them? Batman demanded, anger simmering in his voice. Because villains don't change their nature, Ashbourne replied bluntly. I highly doubt Sinestro was going to turn into some superhero who fights for justice. His connection to the darkness ran far deeper than Superman's ever did. That's the only reason I'm giving the rest of you the chance to live. Deep down, you're still heroes. His words left Hal and the others speechless. Your answers? Ashbourne asked, not forgetting the choices he had given them. We'll restore the balance, Cyborg said softly, his voice carrying the weight of regret. The others nodded in quiet agreement. Ashbourne gave a satisfied nod and pulled out his phone. Hey Siri, create a Multiverse Justice League watchtower. Make it the size of a universe. Equip it with scanners capable of detecting crimes across the multiverse, specifically those that could lead to a universe falling into darkness and dying. Include everything else that might be necessary, Ashbourne said calmly. Everyone looked at him in confusion. After all, what kind of phone could actually do something like that? Understood. This portal will lead you to the watchtower, Siri said. Ashbourne nodded in approval before stepping through the portal Siri created, motioning for the others to follow. When they emerged, they were met with the breathtaking sight of what looked like an entire city inside the watchtower. This watchtower is equipped with countless sub-dimensions, each tailored to a specific hero, Siri explained as she floated in front of them. For example, the Superman dimension is a city created to house only Superman. It can hold up to 8 billion of them. The same applies to the Batman dimension, Wonder Woman dimension, and many more. Time flows differently here in the watchtower, Siri explained. The past and future of the multiverse coexist at once, allowing Justice League members to respond to calls for help across all timelines. Currently, an infinite number of distress signals are occurring simultaneously. While it's possible to answer every call, speed is essential. Once the balance of a universe breaks, it begins to collapse. A massive screen appeared before them, displaying a map of the multiverse. Each universe was marked with indicators showing the heroes steadily losing ground. Alongside it, countdowns ticked away, showing how much time remained before certain universes would fall. When a universe loses its balance entirely, Siri continued, it descends into the dark multiverse and begins to fade from existence. Your mission is twofold: prevent universes from falling, and erase the dark multiverse itself, ensuring nothing escapes to spread chaos. Ashbourne wasted no time searching for a universe filled with robots and advanced technology, something that could prove useful. He didn't want to rely too much on Siri, nor did he want to overexert himself. The more he acted, the higher the risk that the darkness would trace the anomaly back to him. First things first, we need manpower, Ashbourne said calmly. Go to this universe and bring back the Superman robots. Make sure to arrive during the exact time period of the alert. It'll help keep the darkness from noticing any inconsistencies caused by time flow. With those words, Ashbourne teleported away, heading toward a universe where he'd spotted a particularly cool-looking robot. In the depths of space, Superman stood alongside the full might of the Justice League, well, almost full. A few members remained on Earth as a second line of defense. Superman floated at the forefront, facing dozens of alien ships, his eyes locked on the golden blur rocketing toward them. It was a Mazo. A machine designed to mimic and adapt to any power it witnessed, save for magic. And now, it was returning to Earth with a singular goal: to wipe out all life. It had been searching for purpose, and someone had given it one. Told it that by erasing all life across the multiverse, it would ascend to a higher dimension and evolve into the ultimate life form. For the first time in its short existence, Amazo understood the hunger for power. It felt something: emotion. And with that newfound emotion, came unstoppable resolve. Chapter 69. Boom. A single punch from Amazo was enough to nearly kill Superman, sending him rocketing toward Earth, unconscious. One by one, the rest of the League stepped in: Captain Atom, Martian Manhunter, and countless others. But none of them could even slow Amazo down. He tore through their defenses, flying straight toward Earth at such incredible speed that the planet's destruction seemed inevitable. Back on Earth, heroes scrambled into the skies, doing everything they could to intercept him. But it was all in vain. Amazo's trajectory never faltered, until a beam of heat vision slammed into his side, sending him off course. Supergirl. Her surprise attack was the first and only thing that managed to slow him down. But it didn't last. Amazo turned toward her, expressionless, and fired his own heat vision in retaliation. With a blast that put 1,000 suns to shame, space and time warped under the sheer heat compressed into those twin beams of energy. The heat vision surged forward at such impossible speed that Supergirl could only watch in frozen horror as they closed in. But just before impact, at the very last second, something grabbed her, shielding her in the nick of time. The figure intercepted the beams, deflecting them with raw force. The redirected heat vision slammed back into Amazo, striking him head-on and sending him rocketing off the planet. "Are you all right?" Ashbourne asked, holding Supergirl in his arms like one might cradle a child. He looked down at her calmly, his face just inches from hers. Supergirl, caught completely off guard, turned bright red at the closeness. "That heat vision was intense. I barely had time to remove the atoms in their path." "You're flushed," Ashbourne said with a sigh, mistaking her embarrassment for the effects of the attack. He looked up toward Amazo, then at the countless injured heroes, some falling from the sky, others scattered across the battlefield, wounded and struggling. It was a scene that could shatter the fighting spirit of even the strongest warrior. "Can I fight Amazo without using my shadows? I still haven't recovered my MP. On top of that, I can't call for backup. This Amazo would just copy anyone I bring in. Wait, he's weak to magic. Where is Dr. Fate?" Ashbourne thought, frowning as he realized he hadn't seen the Dr. Fate of his universe. His universe is the universe where he gave Batman the Iron Man suit and so on. Sighing to himself, he turned his attention skyward, watching as Amazo came rocketing back toward Earth, his speed now light years beyond anything previously shown. "Due to certain reasons, I can't fight at full power," Ashbourne said calmly. "So, can I make you my temporary herald?" Supergirl's eyes widened as everything around her seemed to slow. Her heart dropped the moment she realized Amazo was now only meters away. "What's a herald?" Supergirl asked, unease tightening her voice as she watched Amazo slowly draw nearer. "It means I gift you my powers," Ashbourne replied calmly. "I don't have much to offer right now, but with the little I can give, although you will not go through a rebirth, it should be enough to unlock your full potential." Supergirl nodded without hesitation, not wanting to waste another second as Amazo closed the final distance. Then arise. What remained of the Shadow Monarch force surged into Supergirl's body. In an instant, she felt divine, like a god reborn. The dark power twisted and reformed under her will, transforming into something new. Ashbourne called it the Sun Monarch force. At speeds beyond comprehension, Supergirl flashed forward, catching Amazo's fist mid-swing, and crushed it effortlessly. "Don't destroy it completely," Ashbourne called out, leaning against a nearby wall to conserve his strength. "It might come back stronger. Just subdue it or something." Supergirl, hearing Ashbourne's words, narrowed her eyes. Slowly, she floated into the sky with Amazo still locked in her grip. Amazo desperately tried to scan and copy her powers, but of course, Ashbourne had made sure that wouldn't happen. The Monarch force shielded her completely. As he watched from below, Ashbourne got a good look at her and quickly realized something. This was the Supergirl from that one cartoon he used to watch as a kid. The one with the mini skirt and the exposed belly button. Since she was floating above, directly in front of Ashbourne, well, it didn't take much to guess what his angle of view was. Fortunately, Supergirl wore her miniskirt with cover under the skirt. She had it covered. Supergirl moved fast, so fast that, to her, time may as well have been frozen. Amazo didn't even have time to react. In a single blur of motion, she tore his body apart and destroyed his power source, giving him no chance to regroup. Though the scattered parts of his body began to slowly draw back together, feeding off the sun's energy. "How do I defeat him?" Supergirl asked, watching in alarm as Amazo's scattered parts began pulling themselves back together. She turned to Ashbourne, only to see his shadows slither out, swallowing every shard of Amazo's body and dragging them into his shadow. "You did a good job. I almost forgot how much potential Kryptonians hold," Ashbourne said casually. Supergirl opened her mouth to question what he had just done, but paused as she felt the power draining from her body. For a brief moment, she had held power on par with that of Superman, the one from the comics. The Superman who could move faster than comprehension, who bench-pressed the Earth for days without sunlight, who broke through dimensions using speed alone, and more. But it was only a temporary power-up, and now it was leaving her. Chapter 70 Inches Ember, a little help, Ashbourne said with a sigh. At his words, all the injured heroes were instantly healed. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. Ember hadn't restored his energy. He then asked Supergirl to gather the others. Once they were together, Ashbourne led them all to the multiversal watchtower, where he assigned someone to tend to them, while he turned his attention back to Amazo. There was a reason Ashbourne hadn't simply hacked Amazo. The robot wasn't just a machine anymore. It felt like the darkness had breathed life into him, and Ashbourne wasn't about to risk hacking that thing. What if the darkness used that chance to corrupt Siri or something? The darkness made one mistake with you, Ashbourne said, his gaze fixed on Amazo as he began drawing out the lingering darkness, absorbing it to speed up his recovery. A faint smirk tugged at his lips before he crushed what remained of the android, making sure there was nothing left for it to regenerate from. Arise, Ashbourne said, eyes narrowing slightly. His attention remained on the destroyed Amazo. This was something he needed to test. Now that he had comprehended death of the endless, he wanted to see if his powers could affect non-living entities like machines. After all, death wasn't limited to living things alone. You and your powers, Death sighed as she appeared beside him, watching as Amazo rose once more, this time as a shadow soldier. Ashbourne just grinned, gaining every power and ability Amazo had mimicked. What his shadow had, I'll fuse you with power soon, Ashbourne said with a smirk. Power was the fusion of Rogue and Hope, but he needed to wait for them to return before proceeding. I thought you had things to do, he added, glancing at Death. It was the first time he'd seen her since she left. Well, I came to watch One Piece. It's more fun with friends, Death said with a smile. Ashbourne smiled back and nodded before shifting his focus to the multiversal watchtower. He simply had Siri handle everything while he returned home to relax, but the moment he arrived, he noticed a missed call from Tyler. He was about to call her back, but paused as he glanced at the TV, only to see the news reporting that Superman's body had gone missing from his grave. It's happening faster than I expected, Ashbourne said, eyes locked on the TV. The screen displayed live footage from the North Pole, where the Fortress of Solitude had suddenly appeared. Inside, Superman's body was now absorbing solar energy, preparing to return to life. Ashbourne switched the feed to display more images, glimpses of those who would soon rise in Superman's absence. This was always the pattern. When a hero vanished, the world felt the void they left behind. And in that emptiness, new figures would step forward, trying to carry the weight of the legend. It had happened with Batman. Now, it was Superman's turn. Ashbourne simply had to make sure nothing went wrong. Anyway, he went on to call Tyler back, and she answered almost instantly. But whatever she wanted to say, it wasn't something she felt comfortable discussing over the phone. So, Ashbourne just invited her over and put on One Piece in the meantime. Where's Ember? Ashbourne muttered, suddenly realizing he'd forgotten about her. He sighed, already picturing how that overgrown chicken would try to get back at him, probably by embarrassing him in front of Tyler. As a grown man, making friends wasn't exactly easy. How does one even go about that? You can't just walk up to someone and say, let's be friends. That's weird. So the fact that he had someone like Tyler, a friend who wasn't after his power or his body, was something he genuinely wanted to treasure. You bastard, you forgot me. Ember suddenly appeared just as the One Piece opening began playing. She was furious. How dare Ashbourne watch One Piece without her? But her rage evaporated almost instantly when he pulled out a bar of chocolate. I only put it on to call you. How could I forget someone as amazing as you are? Ashbourne said awkwardly, clearly forcing the words out. Ember didn't care. She snatched the chocolate, took a bite, and instantly melted into the chair, her eyes rolling back in bliss from the overwhelming pleasure. Chef, make a meal. I've got a guest coming over, Ashbourne said to his shadow chef, who was quietly reading a cookbook. Instantly, the chef stood up and got to work, warping reality itself to avoid wasting even a second of Ashbourne's time. Before long, Tyler arrived. In the blink of an eye, a week had passed since Ashbourne's arrival in the DC universe. The Multiversal Justice League had expanded rapidly. Every hero, whether Superman or otherwise, was now armed with a lantern ring, as well as customized weapons and armor. Ashbourne didn't care whether the heroes were already durable enough to withstand universal-level attacks. He still forced them all to wear armor, each set resembling that of Iron Man. Heroes constantly came and went from the multiversal watchtower. Some responded to alerts across the multiverse, while others returned to their home worlds. Meanwhile, an army of Amazo robots could be seen flying off into different universes to assist where they could. Despite their growth, manpower was still limited, and the robots were essential to covering the gaps. "Why are you here again?" Ember asked in displeasure, eyeing Supergirl seated at the dinner table. "She's Prime Supergirl, be nice to our guest," Ashbourne said, giving Ember a light slap on the back of the head for her rude behavior. Ember nearly turned around and slapped him with the force of the Omniverse, but held herself back, choosing instead to snort in irritation. "Ashbourne invited all of the Primes," Supergirl said with a light smile. This was the same Supergirl Ashbourne had gifted a portion of his Shadow Monarch force. That power, combined with the accelerated growth from the training dimension, had allowed her to develop her own Sun Monarch force, pushing her far beyond her natural limits.
Another tale fades into the silence. But here, in the fantasy audiobook library, stories never sleep. Subscribe and return when your heart seeks adventure. We'll be waiting.